What's the wildest, so where are they now, revelation about someone from your past? I googled my first grade crush and discovered a long list of arrests and his untimely death a few months ago. This was written in 2012. The first girl I ever had a big crush on in 6th or 7th grade believes that December 21st really is the end of the world. Last I checked, she had moved to Brazil, bought a house, a used Porsche, and racked up 30 to 40 grand in credit card debt. She hasn't worked a day in just over a year. December 22nd is going to be a rough day for a lot of people. Went to middle school with this really cute girl, but she had some emotional problems. She'd cry a lot and always get into trouble. 20 years later, I get a hold of her after my divorce because I don't know why. She's beaten cancer and is very well adjusted. We're dating now. Couldn't be happier. My dad looked up someone he used to be good friends with when he was younger. Turns out he's the creator of a game called Club Penguin, and he sold that game to Disney and got around $100 million. My dad's neighbor and childhood friend went ape on his entire family with a hatchet. A friend who everyone thought was an idiot is now a millionaire. I'm really happy for him. I never thought he was an idiot. You can still be an idiot and be a millionaire, by the way. Some guy I went to school with did a surfing trip around the world, sold his stuff and settled down on some island halfway around the world, I can't remember the name of where. He became intimate with one of the natives, lived on a beach, and sold dream catchers to tourists. Go figure. A year or two back, I googled my best friend from 2nd and 3rd grade, someone I hadn't seen in about 30 years, and my last memory of whom was us playing with our Han Solo and Boba Fett action figures. He's an executive at Pixar. It was about then that my midlife crisis went into full swing. And you know what? Fair enough. When you have that to compare yourself to, a little bit of ruminating and future panicking is fair enough. Luckily for me, my friends are all just as big a group of losers as I am. There was a guy that I wrestled in high school when he was a freshman who ended up being the 3-time state champion. Everyone said he could wrestle at any college in the nation. I googled his name a couple of years ago and found out he was in prison for committing the unspeakable act against his best friend's mother while he was intoxicated. I bumped into someone that I knew from high school who'd always been a bit of an aloof jerk, but I didn't have much contact with him. I didn't recognize him initially because he acted very spaced out and had some serious facial scarring going on. I found out from another friend that since I'd last seen him, he had dropped out of university, moved to Paris, where he had taken quite a heroic amount of substances, and taken over someone else's religion/cult. He tried to convince his parishioners that they could all fly, and demonstrated this from a window on the 2nd floor. Hence the facial scarring. Whenever I feel like an underachiever compared to other schoolmates, I think of this guy. But to be fair, he was the leader of a cult. High school friend who graduated in 2010 with a 1-year-old child, waiting for her boyfriend to be released from prison so they could get married. He was convicted for doing the unspeakable act on another girl. One of my best friends in high school is now in the biggest rock band in my country. Every time I see him on TV in his slick rock outfits, I see the 16-year-old him. Ponytail in his neck, old woolen sweater to his knees, and army boots. I texted him yesterday when he played a live show on TV. I got a text back about 1 minute after they'd finished. It's very surreal. This one kid I knew in high school always seemed like he was a few cans shy of a six-pack. Sweet guy, but he always acted like he had been hitting the wacky tobacco a bit hard, and in general he seemed a bit inane. Fast forward to now, I friended him on Facebook and it turns out he's a local newscaster with a journalism degree and competes in professional ballroom dancing. He constantly posts really smart, witty things, and in general has his life together, way more than I would have expected. Chatting with him, I learned that he never really felt like he had any need to be himself in high school because people were so shallow anyway. So he played a monkey-like character, and at home practiced his ballroom dancing, wrote articles for online publications under a pseudonym, and, I can only assume, sat around listening to classical music, wearing a top hat and monocle, and sipping scotch like a sir. You just never really know people. Oh god, I have a list. 2 of my high school classmates became Olympic gymnasts. 1 high school crush had a nervous breakdown and brandished a knife at a police officer, who shot her. She survived and eventually opened a massage parlor in Vegas. A high school classmate, who I always thought was a bit of a jerk, became a police officer. He's currently in prison for participating in a drive-by shooting. And a childhood friend moved away and we lost touch. He became an actor playing Bulk on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I found out a few months ago my brother's friend in middle school I used to play GoldenEye with in my basement founded this little website called Reddit, Alexis Ohanian. I went to check up on my ex. We weren't very serious and it ended amicably, but didn't keep in touch, partly due to me moving across the ocean. I went to look her up earlier this year and found out she died in a car crash because she wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Weird feeling, but I feel worse for her daughter who now has to grow up without a mother. I recently found my best friend from 2nd grade on Facebook and discovered she's now a very proud exotic dancer. This is fine and all, but what was shocking is that when we were kids, I was the overtly weird and flirty one. She was so innocent that this discovery was kinda jarring. I've been debating whether or not to just show up at the club, buy a lap dance, and make it awkward. A very nice kid I went to middle school with took a bunch of substances and then beat 2 homeless people to death with his bare hands. He did this when he was 16. Oof. I used to know this girl growing up. Her parents knew my parents, so even though she was a few years younger, we spent a lot of time together. She was tall and lanky, super awkward and shy. 15 years later, my parents tell me she won some kind of modeling competition, married an older guy in the industry that she met on the show, which was Vegas Wedding with Elvis, and moved to California. Apparently, he's got serious money, so she doesn't work, but he flies her friends over from Sweden regularly so she doesn't get bored or lonely. There's this 30-year age gap, but apparently it's true love and they're both very happy. Not as crazy as some stories here, but I had a friend during my teenage years that I nearly hung out with on the daily. We always hung around in skate parks and did a lot of green herb together and had a good time. She was a good friend, but moved away at 17. I lost contact with her, which is partially my fault, but that's another story. Contacted her about 2 years ago, asking if she wanted to hang out and smoke a bit, like in the old days. I got a response and we met and started smoking some green herb. She looked me in the eyes and told me, "I should tell you, I am a cop nowadays." It was kind of strange to see my old friend that was into the punk scene and generally didn't like cops too much, being a cop. My secret crush from middle school grew up and became Pink. Dear Pink, well done, Alicia. This is why I kept it secret. I totally knew you outclassed me. Yeah, I reckon you should have shot your shot back then. What's the worst that could happen? They write a song about what a lame, limp, poorly endowed boyfriend you were, and just have your name be the title of the song. Oh, actually, maybe you did the best thing. I'm a bit late to the game, but this girl I went to school with ended up in LA making adult movies. The twist is that she's using my real name as her adult film star name. My name is really not that common, and while we were friends in school, she'd told me a few times that she really liked my name. It's very strange to Google her and see her mid-deed amidst a gaggle of strangers with my name. She and I went out a few times in high school, but nothing came of it. I ran into her years later and talked briefly, exchanged contact info, and parted. I asked her out, but she kept putting it off, and eventually I stopped asking. Maybe I was never the kind of guy she was interested in and didn't know how to properly say no. So maybe she gave excuses, hoping that I'd get the hint. I looked her up sometime later and found out she'd changed her last name. Not terribly uncommon when someone gets married. Oh, so she's got married. Well, good for her, I guess, I think. I'll just go out to check out her Facebook profile and yep, there's an album of honeymoon pictures. And oh, there's her wife. So that explains a lot. I found out my 1st grade guy crush is currently a woman. I've tried to look up my first love a number of times over the last few years, but for a long time she did a good job of keeping her info off the internet. Last year, however, I found some information I'd rather not have found. She went on an alcoholic bender, got kicked out of the Navy, I think, had a kid, and had been arrested at least twice for multiple counts of theft and being a working girl. I always wonder how things might have been different if I'd moved across country with her when she wanted me to 10 years ago. Sadly, she put me in a position where I just couldn't do that. 2 weeks' notice to leave my hometown without a plan or money just wasn't something I could do at that age. Wherever you are now, I hope your life is better than it seems from the outside looking in. One of my good friends in grade school was raised by extremely religious and uptight parents. We're talking the kind of parents who wouldn't let us play Final Fantasy because it had magic in it, and that was the work of the devil. He moved away in like 6th grade. I found him on MySpace back when that was the main social media thing. The guy is now about as flamboyantly gay as can possibly be. I'm sure his parents are thrilled. My best friend from 5th grade is in the new 90210 series and also voiced Anakin Skywalker in the Clone Wars cartoon. I grew up with a girl from elementary school to grade 11. We were never close, but we had a bunch of classes together, decently connected with my family. Smart, beautiful, popular. Her mum was great too, used to clean our elementary school in the mornings. I haven't seen her in a few years, but I found out her mum had been going crazy, till the point where she walked up behind the girl and slit her throat. Nicked her carotid artery, but thankfully she made it. Caught her mum and she's being charged. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I visited New Zealand a while back, I stopped by a bookstore and picked up an old hardback copy of Lord Jim by Joseph E. Conrad, dated 1928, with a "To Lennox Douglas from J.E.C." on the first page. If you're not familiar with Lord Jim, the gist of the plot is as follows. A young man is crewing a ratty old transport ship when it has an accident and is expected to sink. The crew, including Jim, pile into the only lifeboat and escape. However, the boat doesn't sink and they're all put on trial and labeled cowards for life. Jim spends his years trying to be a good and brave man in the far corners of the world to atone. And he dies young in a blaze of glory, so to speak. Anyway, I googled Lennox Douglas. 13 to 14 years after receiving this book as a gift, he found himself serving as a crew member on a transport ship in a convoy trying to evacuate Allied troops from Greece. The Luftwaffe sank his ship. 2 destroyers stayed behind to help survivors of the wreck, and both of them were also sunk within hours. There were virtually no survivors. The lifeboats were all strafed and sunk as well. So I guess I honestly don't know how to feel. I haven't figured out the moral yet. It's not just coincidence. It's not appropriate, it's just bizarre and unsettling and sad. Maybe a little toast for bravery. A friend of mine who got me started on my wild, substance-fueled, debaucherous life in my late teens, no regrets, I had a great time, one day decided he'd go to LA and become a rich and famous rock star. No internet back then, so we didn't stay in touch. I was fully expecting to see him on TV one day. He was that kind of guy. Hot, persistent, and ruthless. In the nicest way possible. But it never happened. When I went to visit my hometown last year, I met his sister. She told me he had been gone for about 5 years without ever contacting his family. Then he came back, nice and smiling but not answering any questions. Instead, he made a big fire in the garden, burned all of his belongings, and went on to become a monk in a monastery. I still wonder what happened there. I googled my Chinese ex-girlfriend and came up with hundreds of people who were not her. A couple of weeks ago, I got a spam text for e-cigs. It showed up like a real number, had my first name in the message, and was signed with Johnny, which caught me off guard. That was the name of one of my dealers and good friends from college that I hadn't spoken to in a couple of years. So I went to check his Facebook page, thinking maybe one of our mutual friends gave him my number and he was messing with me. Turns out he passed away in June. No idea what happened, but his page was flooded with condolences and memories and such. I cried when I saw a post from his dad about the funeral. We didn't exactly end on great terms, but he was a nice guy and was always there to cheer people up. Rest in peace, Johnny. My aunt gave up a child for adoption because of how young she was when he was born. 20 years later, we found out he became an NFL player for the Chargers. Well, I can't say I condemn anyone in this. It seems like he did well enough with the upbringing he got, even if he definitely doesn't have to thank her for dumping him. And if she was too young to raise a kid and had a good adoption system set up, great, as long as she doesn't go trying to grub any favors off him. I'm from the suburbs of Chicago, and I had the same best friends since 6th grade. One went MIA when we went to college. I still remember the last time I saw him. We were at my grandparents' cottage in Indiana. It was me, Mike, my freshman year roommate, my 2 other buddies, and my girlfriend. It was the day before we were all leaving, so we were going to take the pontoon out to the sandbar for a few hours. I asked Mike if he wanted to go, but he was sleeping, so he said no. The rest of us went out and were there for a few hours when here comes Mike heading for us on the Wave Runner. He pulls up to us and says, "Hey guys, I'm leaving," and turned around and headed up into the sunset on the Wave Runner. I tried calling or texting or going by his house, and he was just never there or never answered. It's been 2.5 years since I've seen him. We're all seniors now. I found out this past summer he's studying nuclear engineering in Louisiana and working part-time on an oil rig. Kid I went to high school with, unspeakable act registry, there for the worst sort of that particular crime too. I can't say the word on YouTube. I have a better one, but it's more of a where were they then? My biological father pieced out when I was in maybe 6th grade. When I was about 24, I hadn't seen him since. I lived on the other side of the country from my hometown. I was in a band with some friends and we called ourselves Delta 9, short for Delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol. Anyways, I decided to Google the name to see if any other bands were using that name. Being on the green herb at the time, I soon lost myself in the Google results and was just reading interesting stuff about green herb. I happened across an Amazon link. It turned out to be my father's dissertation on the effects of THC on mice. I had no idea. Pregnant, 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 married, married, pregnant, dead, dead, graduated college and doing quite well for himself, dropped out of high school, semi-successful DJ, pregnant. There was this one kid I was an absolute jerk to back in primary school. That's elementary school for you Americans. Not just me, but the entire class just picked on this one guy for some god-unknown reason. I can't remember it, but it was bad. So bad it got to the point where I threw a stick at him and split his mouth open. I felt absolutely terrible the moment I threw the stick, but everyone laughed at him whilst he screamed on the floor, blood pouring out of his mouth. So I dragged him off to the nurse, told her what I'd done and got detention for a week. Well deserved to me, I think. Now this kid wasn't exactly the best looking kid around, but who was at 9 years old? Lots of puppy fat, smelled a bit funny and was just a bit awkward. After the incident, I talked to him a bit more and he turned out to be really nice. I lost contact with him when I moved school 2 weeks later. 10 years pass and I accidentally bump into him at the shops. I didn't even recognize the guy. He knew me though, and he got handsome as F. No homo, but the guy was good looking, well-dressed, lean, and just incredibly happy. All I could say was how sorry I was about throwing that stick a decade ago, but he brushed it off and laughed like it never happened. He was going great in life and actually thanked me for being a jerk to him. Apparently, if myself and the other guys hadn't bullied him, he probably would have stayed the same person as he was before. Now, I definitely don't condone any form of bullying, as I've been on both ends of the shtick, no pun intended, but I was glad he'd risen so far above me and become this fantastic guy. I really hope he succeeds in life, he genuinely deserves it. As for me, I can only hope I'll end up as good a person as him. When I was 16 or 17, I was hanging out with this really strange kid every now and then. He was a racist, fascist, Third Reich enthusiast with a huge interest and great taste in everything 60s, 70s, and 80s music, and an awesome collection of music original reel-to-reel audio tapes with an accompanying awe-inspiring collection of old recorders. He used to go on and on about the N-words and then went on in starry-eyed admiration of Jimi Hendrix and managed to make a seamless transition to how great the leader of the Third Reich was, all while trying to keep toning down his sentiments to appease my really liberal left-wing views. One of the most messed up and twisted people I've ever known. And of course, he did substances. Lots and lots of substances. Alcohol, speed, white snow, molly, just about everything else you can think of in quantities I've never seen in my entire life. And he went through tons of the stuff in every evening, popping pills like Smarties. He constantly got in trouble with his parents, brother, the cops, a lot of shady characters. Never finished anything, school or several apprenticeships, failed all of them. He sometimes moved in with his grandma, sometimes his parents, always until someone kicked in the door and raided the place. Sometimes the cops, sometimes someone he had beef with, or occasionally even himself when he forgot where he had his keys. One of the most effed up people you can imagine, but he was fun to hang out with, every 2 months or so, as he was kind of exhausting as well. I occasionally met him on my way to or from work when I was older, always when he was drunk or on something else, while he himself was on his way to or from work as well. And then I lost contact and no one else heard from him, so I figured he had to be in prison, rehab, or dead. Either was imaginable or preferable to his regular lifestyle. A couple of weeks ago, I learned he's married and building a house. Boom, went my mind. I think I actually have a really interesting one. I was friends with this guy named Willie in junior high. He was my only friend there. We were close but lost contact after I moved a couple of cities over. Flash forward 5 years and my sister starts dating this guy who's my age. I meet him and lo and behold, it's my old friend from junior high. Except he's changed. He's obviously on something. I spotted it almost immediately as I walked in. I noticed the pockmarks from injections. Turns out my friend from junior high was now dating my sister and is addicted to smack. Fast forward 18 months and now he's wanted for grand larceny. So this isn't someone I actually looked up, I just heard it on the grapevine, but it's a pretty weird story. A guy from my secondary school class had moved to Australia, presumably for work, and while he was there, he evidently got a bit lonely. He hired a working girl, but got a bit of a shock when he discovered that she was in fact a pre-op transsexual. Somehow he didn't discover this until after they had done the deed. In a poorly thought-out act of revenge, he stole her handbag, which contained her passport. She was Indonesian, and he sent her a text demanding $100,000 for the handbag and passport back. So, what was her response to this? She called the frickin' cops. He was arrested and charged with theft and extortion. Moral of the story, don't try to extort people who haven't done anything illegal because they'll just call the cops, you jerk. In short, a guy moved to Australia and slept with a working girl, got freaked out when he discovered she was transsexual and stole her passport and demanded $100,000 for it back. She called the cops and had him arrested. What was your most serious, "thank God I double-checked" moment? Looking through papers to shred, I opened an envelope and inside was a $2,500 check. It was a refund from when we refinanced our mortgage. Things like that is why checks are such an outdated concept. Why couldn't they deposit it directly into your bank account? I think they'd certainly be happy had the check been shredded. Student pilot 8 years ago. Got fuel in a high-wing training airplane. The instructor was ready to go. I'd done the pre-flight before the fuel truck arrived. You can't see the fuel caps from the ground. I was about to start the engine, but got out, hopped up on the step, and found both caps loose. You always do your whole pre-flight yourself. No excuses. Someone could have just landed and delivered it to you fully fueled. Run the whole check anyway. Fly to another airport and park it for lunch. Full pre-flight before you head home. Full checklist every time. Not a pilot, great-grandfather was. He imparted wisdom on my grandmother who shared it with me when I expressed interest on getting flying lessons. Everyone on the runway is a frickin' idiot. You can never be too sure someone didn't mess with your plane. Check it out, then check it again. 'Cause a car crash might not kill you, but a plane crash will. Was paying my mortgages online and almost added an extra digit to my payment amount. That would have sucked so bad because it could have wiped my checking account out. My dad transferred $40,000 to his mortgage instead of his savings. He's still trying to get it back. He'll lose interest eventually? Almost submitted a test paper without my name on it. Almost forgot my room keys before a 6-hour drive back to my university. I think this applies. So summer 2010, my family is having the inside of the house painted. Hot as all hell, so my parents leave the upstairs windows open day and night to let out the paint smell and help it dry with the hot air. I really don't like this. I'm a naturally paranoid person. This went on for several weeks. We have a pretty big house. One day before I leave school, I decided to go upstairs and shut the window and lock it. They can yell at me later if they want. When I came home that afternoon, the painter told me, "Hey, that big ladder you have on the side of the house was getting in the way, so I moved it. Hope that's okay." I responded, "We don't have a big ladder." Apparently someone came up to the house and set up a ladder to get through the open window, but I'd closed it just by chance that day. I guess they saw our painter coming and they ditched it and split, sans ladder. Oddly enough, my parents kept opening the window at night and during the day after all that crap. Yes, we came up on a free ladder, but I'm scared of heights. Gotta say, those robbers don't seem like the most committed types, or maybe they're just smarter than me and they know when to cut and run. Answering exams and I finished early. Double-checked when the teacher reminded us that there were only 5 minutes left and saw that I hadn't answered the whole backside of a page. Luckily, it was multiple choice though. Oh my god, this happened to me in high school. I stayed up all night studying for a difficult history test, finished pretty early and felt like I did decently well on it. Went to my teacher's office later in the day to ask a question and she casually mentioned the backside of the test. Me? There was a backside? Teacher? Oh god, you didn't know? No. At this point I just broke down and started crying in her office. I couldn't believe I was going to fail the exam I'd stayed up all night for because I was too much of an exhausted idiot to turn the damn page over. Luckily, she took pity on me and let me do the reverse side of the test right then and there in her office. I'm still so grateful that she was so kind. Many other teachers would have said, "TS," and let me fail. I was at a four-way intersection at night when my light turned green. I was the only car on the road and in a hurry, but something in me felt like I needed to look left before I went. Right after I turned my head to look, a car without any headlights on ran the red light, doing probably 50 miles per hour. Had I just immediately gone instead of glancing left, I would have been T-boned and probably killed. Listen to your gut, people. Reminds me of the one time my friend and I were going back to his place. We'd stopped at the lights and he was right behind me, and the light turned green. Well, I looked before going, because that's a good idea, and at night as well. Saw a guy coming down the street, at least they had their lights on, and just sat because I knew they weren't going to stop. Not sure if I would have got through or not, but you can just tell some people aren't going to stop at the light. I was rock climbing Apple Valley, California. I was in a rush and a bit teed off that I had to clean a route that someone had already agreed to do and then bailed at the last second. My belayer was preoccupied in a conversation and didn't check my knot. I jumped on the climb and got a really bad feeling right before I got to the first bolt. I decided to recheck everything and noticed my knot was half done. I stopped and double-checked everything else before continuing. That moment comes to mind before every sport climb. I also never had that friend belay me again. I once worked at a school where I had to look after the kids who stayed until their parents picked them up. Don't know what it's called in English, after-school care? They usually had the classic little game where they would hide and I pretended not to know where they were and told the parents that I hadn't seen them all day. Problem is that they would do this 2 or 3 at a time and then come out all together. Usually. One time this kid started hiding with some others at around 6 p.m. but didn't come out at all. So he kept hiding away until 7 p.m. at the end of my shift. Thank frick that during my closing routine I found him in some ridiculous tiny little space because I totally forgot about him. I had about 40 to 50 parents come in between 6 and 7. When his mother came to pick him up way later than I expected, I acted all jolly, but I seriously would have closed off since I thought all the children had left. Not a proud moment. I almost killed my niece's cat via washing machine. I was staying with my brother and his family for a bit when I first moved to the city. One day I threw a bunch of clothes in the machine, went back to my room to get a sweater, threw that into the machine on top of the curious feline that had jumped in while I was out of the room. Poured in the detergent and just about closed the lid when I decided to double-check the pocket of my sweater. As soon as I moved it out jumped the cat. Never told anyone, but I made a point of checking from then on. Very recently, I changed a light bulb at work in a corridor that rarely got used. A long fluorescent bulb. As I was walking away, turning a corner, I realized the pitch of the hum of the light seemed off. Just seemed higher pitched than normal. I went back to check to make sure the light was on. It was on fire. Don't know if it was the bulb or the fixture, but the whole thing was in flames and the light was on. Dealt with it, but if I'd kept walking, the building would probably have taken serious damage before sprinklers kicked in. A colleague of mine saved me. I'd printed around 500 letters for him, and when I handed them over, he said the phone number didn't look right. I dialed it to check, and it was an adult phone line for lonely people. I'd put 2 numbers the wrong way around. We changed our number after that in case any customers misdialed. So glad that my colleague spotted it before those letters were sent out. I woke up late at night feeling thirsty. Everything was dark. I always keep a glass of water by the bed. I grope for the glass and grab it, and I'm about to take a swig when I suddenly think, no, better check. So I put it down and stumble groggily over to the light and switch it on, and there was a huge cockroach floating dead in the glass. And the gagging narrator award for an image so gross and sudden that you pause my recording process temporarily goes to you, sir or madam. Congratulations. Although admittedly, in this job the award gets handed out so frequently that it's worth slightly less than an Emmy, but more than a Tony. This was before backup cameras. I put the car in reverse with my foot on the brake and turned to look behind me. I just saw the ponytail of a little girl disappear behind my car as she bent over to pick up a toy. Away in the distance, her mum was running flat out, her face contorted in terror like I've never seen before. Not really a double check, but that's my story. Citations on an English paper. Every fricking time. One time I was putting my hair straightener away and I dropped it into the toilet. As soon as it hit the water, it started hissing and sizzling, and I assumed it was because it was still hot. For a second, I went to reach over and yank it out. Then I was like, wait, it's still plugged in. It never tripped the safety switch that bathroom outlets usually have because this house was old and didn't have bathroom outlets. I had to run a cheap extension cord from the office to the bathroom to do my hair. Literally almost grabbed a live electrical appliance that was shorting out in water. I'd copied a naughty adult link to send to my boyfriend, ended up not sending it by the way, and later was emailing my students to update them about something else. Accidentally pasted the link into the email and almost sent 20 college students a link to Pornhub. Short term, printing everything off for a London-Edinburgh trip last year and realized when double-checking our train tickets from London to Edinburgh, they were the wrong day. We still had one more day in London. Nothing could be done until we got to London, but if we hadn't noticed before getting to the train station on the day out, it would have been costly. Long term, this stretches the definition of double-checked, but it's still important. I tried to give blood a few times while I was in the Navy, but my iron was always too low no matter what I ate recently. Decided to check it out, got tests done, and I was anemic. Doctor asks if I want to just treat that or go further. Of course, go further and find out why I'm anemic. 18 months and a zillion tests later, Crohn's disease. Since caught while I was in the service, I got a medical retirement discharge, some cash, a monthly stipend, and full health care. If I'd just got the anemia treated, I would have gone out while sick deeper in and would probably be in a world of pain right now. I was driving a reach truck, working overnight at some depot. Another guy had crawled in to move a box. I don't know what the frick he was thinking, and I never double-checked because why the frick would I? Always did after that. If I hadn't, he'd be dead. I was pretty shaken and he was oblivious. It was such a seemingly minor thing to everyone except the guy driving the reach. I told him that if I'm driving the reach, he needs to stay the frick out of the aisle and his family can be glad that I lifted that load to look. I assume he just thought I was being a butthole, because he didn't seem to have any idea how close he came to dying. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was cleaning my room and throwing out a bunch of school papers, old envelopes, etc. I'm always nervous throwing out garbage bins in apartments. I guess the garbage chute seems more permanent than a bin that's collected weekly. Because there were so many papers and I was moving, I decided to double-check that bag. I had an envelope of over $1,300 in saving bonds and tips that I'd hidden in my drawer earlier in the year. I felt like I'd made $1,300 that day. I have a very similar story. My parents were moving out of their house, so I was cleaning all of my stuff that I still had stashed there. I found a box of papers from grad school. I graduated more than 20 years ago. I looked through it briefly, took out the graded copy of my master's thesis, and was going to throw the rest away. It was all just papers and notes from classes I'd taken, and I'd figured I'd never have any use for any of it. As I was taking the box to recycling, I just had a weird feeling that I should take the time to look through it all. So I started going through each folder. Lo and behold, I found a folder that must have had about $500 in savings bonds that I'd brought to school, and I guess I must have forgotten about. Veterinarian here. I asked for my assistant to bring me some glucose to inject into a 2-kilogram dog with hypoglycemia. He brings me this vial, and right as I was about to open it, I looked at it, and it was potassium chloride, KCl, which is used for euthanasia. Both were the same size and shape, but the one that would stop the dog's heart had a big black stamp on it, so it wasn't hard to differentiate them. As an extra, a professor of mine during a surgery asked for an antibiotic, which needs to be diluted before use, to inject after surgery was done. The intern brought the vial already diluted, but instead of putting injection water into the bottle, he'd actually put KCl. As the professor was injecting the antibiotic, she noticed the heart of the dog was stopping, but fortunately, the amount needed to kill the animal was a bit higher and they were able to save it. When they asked and saw what he'd actually put into the bottle, she went nuts on him for not double-checking it before diluting. I don't know what happened to the students. This is what I've always thought when I bring my cat into the vet for shots updates. I thought, that's ridiculous, they probably have the bottles for euthanasia marked and kept in a different spot. Thank you for terrifying me. Yes, thank you for enlightening all of us that we're one tired medical personnel away from a lethal injection at any given time. Fabulous. Ooh, I have one for this. I've lived in a few places over the years, but they all have one thing in common. Spiders, and lots of them. At an early age, I learned to always smack the heels of my shoes against the floor, my knee, etc. to knock out any spiders that might have crashed in my shoes overnight. One day, I was getting ready to leave the house and something interrupted that little ritual. Came back and couldn't remember if I'd checked and was about to slip them on when I decided to make sure, and sure enough, there was one that fell right out onto my knee. But it wasn't just any spider, no. It was a freaking black widow. After jumping up and possibly crapping myself in the process, I found it dancing across the floor and dealt with it. But good lord, the thought of what might have happened if I hadn't double-checked still makes my skin crawl to this day. Every time I'm driving and I'm turning into a different lane, I always check over my shoulder. I check all of my mirrors, then look over my shoulder. Do you know how many times it looks clear to merge into a different lane based off the mirrors, but when I finally look over my shoulder, I see someone right next to me? Especially bloody motorcyclists. A bit of background first. My university degree was split between two of the departments of my university, the Humanities Department and the Law and Social Sciences Department. I mostly worked with Humanities, with LSS handling about 30 to 40% of my degree. So at the start of my final year, I got my standard email from Humanities asking me to sign up for my history modules for the year. Oddly, there was no matching email from LSS for my politics modules, but I figured that I was probably only having politics modules in the second semester, which was a stupid assumption, but also plausible. A couple of months into the semester, I get an email informing me that I won't have enough credits to graduate at the end of the year. What? So yeah, The university's student services had gone through some internal restructuring, and in the process, I had become that one person who slips through the net. I had to rush and sign up for politics modules quickly. I was confirmed on them a couple of days later. I was chatting about it with a friend and thought, I should check to see when my first politics essay is due. It was 5 days away. I hadn't been to a single seminar or lecture. Well, crap. Happy ending. With 2 days to go, I managed to get in contact with my tutor, who got me a 2-week extension for extenuating circumstances after student services ignored my original application for an extension. It was my worst essay of my university career, but it was a pass, so screw it. This is more of a thank frick I had my husband double check, but anyways. Last week we went to bed downstairs a little late since our 3-year-old had colic. We lived in a half-finished apartment and heard a weird sound like the bulkhead door had been opened from the unfinished half of the basement. I, of course, thought someone had broke in or an animal had got in, so we locked ourselves in the room with our daughter and 4-year-old son and then called my brother-in-law who lives upstairs to check on it, since I didn't want to risk our children. He checks and clears it, but I just couldn't sleep after, which was a good thing since not even 10 minutes after he went upstairs, I heard a thump and sheet metal hitting the floor. At this point, I told my husband to quickly go out of the room, lock the door behind him and run up to get our dog, who is not people-friendly at all to those outside our family or close friends, to have him check the basement. When my husband went out, he looked over to see a panel had come off our furnace and it was billowing smoke and the fire alarms weren't going off. Thankfully, I knew where the emergency shutoff was. To keep this as short as possible, if I hadn't insisted my husband go out again, we might have been overcome by smoke inhalation in our sleep along with my sister and her whole family. In conclusion, furnace almost caught fire while the family was sleeping in a house with apparently faulty smoke alarm systems. Get your furnaces checked regularly and make sure you know where your emergency shutoff is, and test your fire alarms. Don't know if this counts, but I had a weird feeling something was off about my wife's behavior. Checked her phone, which I'd never done before and felt terrible about, and found out she cheated on me. It led to a cascade of discovery, as in she was in a relationship with this guy and getting pregnant from him and had had an abortion while visiting her family. Getting divorced now, please don't take this as you shouldn't trust your partner, but be aware of changes in behavior. Winter here in Sweden. I took out the trash. The door was slightly ajar, but the dogs are really good with staying inside when they're supposed to. Came back inside, sat down, felt a bit uneasy and went to the door. I opened it and the Chihuahua was just there in the garden taking a wee. The dog probably wouldn't have survived for long in -13. How long does a body that tiny and with that many biological dead ends maintain its internal temperature for in temperatures like that? 5 seconds? Sorry, Chihuahua owners. I never shared this story before, so I can finally get this off my chest. When I was 16, I got a call from a friend who was alone at home, and he asked if I wanted to come over for pizza and a video game. And I thought, sure, why not? After a nice evening of food, games and movies, I noticed that he was a little bit off, and it wasn't like him. At one point I asked if he was okay, and we started to talk about girls, life, and problems of 16-year-old boys. Before leaving out, I asked if he wanted me to sleep over so he had some company for the weekend, and he just said, "No, I'll just order more pizza and keep playing at night, but thanks man." Well, I went out the door, and after walking around 10 meters from it, I noticed that I didn't close it properly. So I returned, and before closing, I remember thinking, I'm gonna give a check on him. Within 10 minutes of leaving his house and returning, that mother effer had tried to self-delete. I don't want to share more details about it, it's hard to write while all the memories are returning about this topic, but today, he is happy with 3 kids and a perfect marriage. We see each other once a year, and we always cry after a big hug. I wasn't the one who double-checked, but I am so thankful that the person in question did. Storytime, my high school decided to take the senior class to Six Flags at the end of our year. I'd recently gotten over my fear of roller coasters and decided to ride the Superman ride. Little did I know I'd buckled my seatbelt completely wrong. If it wasn't for the worker who checks everyone's seatbelt before the ride starts, I would have flown out of my seat like Superman and died. I know that moment usually feels like an inconvenience, like hurry up and start the ride, but it seriously saved my life. My first full-time job after college, I was a receptionist and office manager for an office. Within the first couple of weeks, I was told to put in an order for office supplies and was given a list of what to order. Since it was a huge office, there were large quantities of things, of course. While putting everything in, I had accidentally added a 0 at the end of one of the entries. Had I not double-checked, we would have had 1,000 boxes of reams of printer paper delivered instead of the 100 my boss requested. I don't like to think how that would have gone over, being so new at the job, let alone where we would have put that many big heavy boxes. In the German military, one base accidentally ordered 20,000 sunscreens instead of 20,000 bullets. My car is old enough that the lights don't turn themselves off. I have to do it manually. I've had my battery die many times because of this. On vacation in a different state, many hours away from anyone who could help me get my battery recharged, I very nearly walked away with the lights still on, but I turned around to check because I had a funny feeling. Delivery driver carrying acetylene on a flatbed truck. Co-worker had strapped down my load for me before I left for delivery, but I always check it myself just in case. I was able to pop the strap off with my bare hand because it had shifted and gotten some slack in it. Had I not checked, that 300-plus pound bottle of flammable gas could have fallen off like a bomb on the freeway. What's your most awkward, "sorry, but I don't work here" experience? Made the mistake of wearing an orange t-shirt to Home Depot. I was approached 4 or 5 times walking back to the lumber section. The funny thing is the expression of confusion and denial on people's faces. I would say, "Oh, I don't work here, I just wore the wrong shirt today," and they would stare at me perplexed, wondering if I was messing with them. I was at a local thrift store, looking at old typewriters with my sister. They were very, very cheap, and she's a writer, so I was buying her one. There was a fellow there who heard me ask out loud a question about how it works. He was a nice old guy who came over and showed me the inner workings of the unit for a solid 50 to 60 minutes. He was very passionate about typewriters and had expert-level knowledge. After an hour of him showing me everything you could imagine with a typewriter and how they work, I asked a question about the price. He responds with, "Well, I don't know about that because I don't work here. I just like typewriters." He was probably lonely. There's an older gentleman who used to be a professional photographer but had to retire due to being constrained to a wheelchair. He hangs around our camera displays a few hours every week and talks to people about cameras. He's so knowledgeable and so enthusiastic that no one's complained since he started doing it over a year ago. I was at a local computer and game store, and this elderly gentleman asked me where they put the controllers for PS3. I told him, "Sorry, I don't work here, so I don't really know." He said, "Seriously, why would you even work here if you don't know where anything is, dummy?" 10 out of 10 would go to that store again. Imagine the asinine people the folks who do work here have to put up with then. Source: I work at a video game store. I was browsing movies at HMV when a lady came up to me and asked if I had Star Wars on Blu-ray. I was like, "Yeah, of course, they're my favorites." Then she asks where they are. At my house." That's when I realized she thought I worked there and wasn't just wanting to talk about Star Wars. I was in the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul, a very busy store. I asked the shop owner something and he just said, "Give me a plastic bag," which I did. I understand Turkish. Then I helped him for a couple of minutes putting things in bags. I was just trying to help since he was really stressed out. He apologized so many times when he realized I wasn't one of his employees, and he gave me a discount. I mean, what was that guy's employee turnover that he didn't recognize whether someone in his shop was an employee or not? Or is this a one of those faces issue? In 2004, I worked at a Petco that was right next to a Best Buy, so the same blue shirt and khakis, only different logos. I went over to pick up a game right after work and got sucked into a chat with a guy about picking out a laptop. After 10 minutes of going through the pros and cons of various brands, he decides he'd like to get one. I was just like, "Cool, well, good luck with that." I used to work in a bar that was about a 5-minute walk from Tesco, a grocery store. Every Saturday afternoon, the bar would hit a lull between 4 and 5, so I'd get sent to Tesco to pick up fruit, mint, and juice for the night. And seemingly every Saturday, some customer in Tesco would come up to me and mistake me for staff there. My work uniform didn't even look similar to the Tesco uniform. I've never understood it. The best case of mistaking me for someone who worked in Tesco was this. A woman who came up to me while I had my hands full of cartons of juice. She started complaining about the crappy service and unhelpful staff. I tried telling her that I didn't work there, but she kept cutting me off. Eventually, she demanded to speak to my manager. I responded with, "Oh, you'll have to go to the bar around the corner to speak to the manager. That's where she is." The woman looked shocked for a second, but then said, "Oh, well, that explains why this place is run like a poor excuse for a circus. Your manager is off in a bar drinking on the job. I should have guessed it." To which I responded, "No, I work in that bar, and I was sent here for stock. If you want to speak to my manager, you can go to my workplace and talk to her." She realized immediately the mistake she'd made and became much nicer and very apologetic to me. You know someone is a terrible person when you can see them transform so quickly from monster to angel. Then you just know that they abuse that ability and have the power to be a jerk to someone and convince everyone else that it's the other way round because they're always nice otherwise. When I was done working and had gotten back to my apartment, still in my mailman clothes, I was stopped by a woman asking me whether or not I had her package. I had to explain to her that I wasn't at work and that I'd been her neighbor the past 2 years. I was at dinner in a decent restaurant in LA. I was wearing a suit but had taken my jacket off and wasn't wearing a tie, so it was black shoes and pants and a white shirt. I went to the bathroom and was passing this table, and this guy grabbed my arm as I was walking past and said, "Sorry, could you find out where our wine is? We asked you ages ago." At this point, I hadn't realized I resembled the staff in this place and was a bit shell-shocked. So I said, "Sure," and went for a tinkle. On my way back, I thought I'd be a dutiful human being and go and tell the barman, as it was on my way, that this guy hadn't had his wine. The barman slapped his forehead and said, "Hang on," and gave me a glass of white to take to him, which I did and apologized for the delay, and the guy appreciated it too. Then I sat down and went on with my dinner. You probably broke a liquor law by doing that. You're nice, though. I was at Target right after work. I had on a red polo and khakis, and it had my company name embroidered on it that starts with a T. I was doing some network stuff, so I wasn't wearing my normal dress clothes. I forget what I was buying, but I had my cart full and my purse over my shoulder. A woman asked me where the laundry detergent was. I'm used to this, so I just told her that I think it's down a few aisles. The woman lost her ever-loving mind on me, saying that I was a horrible employee, I should know where everything is in my store, I'll never be paid above minimum wage because I'm so stupid. She wanted my name, my supervisor's name, and the number to corporate. It was after her rant that I politely informed her, "Ma'am, I don't work here. I was just telling you where I saw it while shopping for my own stuff." She didn't believe me and went to find a manager. I went to the checkout. I guess she found a manager and brought him to where I was checking out, started demanding that he reprimand me. He then informed her that I didn't in fact work there. She was flabbergasted and just walked away. No apology, no nothing. The manager, however, did apologize to me. I told him no problem, not his fault. You can't fix stupid. In conclusion, I no longer wear red polos to Target. Once I was at Walmart pretty late at night around 11. I think I was looking for cold medicine or something like that. Anyway, a woman who looks to be in her late 30s, I'm 20, comes up to me and shows me her child's school supply list, asking if I can help her find some portfolio folder or something. I was about to tell her that I didn't work there when I saw her daughter, who looked to be around 7 or 8, in one of the aisles peeking out and looking tired and a little nervous. I know how Walmart can be in terms of finding an employee to help you, so I decided to just stick around and helped them find everything on the list. I realized that neither of them spoke very much English, which made some of the items on the lists confusing. It took a good 20 minutes, but they were both really grateful and nice. I guess it's not really an awkward story like you asked for, but still a story. In conclusion, helped a non-English speaking woman and her daughter find school supplies at Walmart, even though I don't work there. Haha, well that sounds like something quite a few people I know would do out of sheer social anxiety rather than inherent niceness. Still pretty great of you though. A couple of weeks ago, I was at my local PetSmart chatting with the one guy there who actually knows his stuff. I have had a good deal of experience with aquariums, but I like to run my ideas by other people before I try them out. We were talking, but a customer came up, so he broke off to assist them. As I was standing there looking at the fish, an old woman walks up to me and asks about what kind of bowl and food she should get for her goldfish her grandson had brought home from the fair. I started to tell her that I didn't work there, but as I glanced around, the guy I was talking to and the other employee were busy. So it went kind of like this. I don't really… You know, the thing is, goldfish actually need a fairly large aquarium, so you should either get at least a 30-gallon setup with this filter and such, or if you don't want to invest that much, I'm sure the store would be more than happy to take it off your hands. If you'd like a more manageable fish, I'd recommend a AITA. Now, here are some good setups for them. Yada yada yada. I finish helping the old woman and immediately get another customer. At this point, I notice there's a mini rush as it's around 5-ish, and people are stopping by after work. This other customer comes up to me and asks a question about what fish would work well in her son's guppy tank. At this point, I'm pretty much committed and I decide to help her too. Eventually, after about 25 minutes and several more customers, the crowd thins out and I go back to my conversation with the employee. I ended up helping PetSmart sell several fish and one aquarium that day. In conclusion, PetSmart customer mistakes me for employee. I assist customers for half an hour because I'm too awkward to correct her. When I was a teenager, I worked in Virgin Records, renamed to Virgin Megastores in the UK now. I'd finished my shift and I'd had a pretty terrible day. I was browsing to buy a couple of CDs to cheer myself up. A customer walked up to me and started asking questions. I'd dealt with customers all day, so I breezily responded, "Sorry, I don't work here." So the customer responds, "But you're wearing a Virgin uniform." There was a super awkward pause during which I could have easily said I'm off duty and about to leave, and recovered, but in panic said, "I just like to wear it," and I walked out of the store. You know those moments when years later you recall an awkward encounter and just shudder? That's my scumbag brain's go-to moment. I had a similar experience while working at HMV many years ago. I'd just finished a shift in the run-up to Christmas, so I slapped a jumper over my HMV t-shirt and started walking toward the door, when a customer decided that it'd be okay to block my path and demand to know if I worked there. I said yes, but I was no longer on the clock and that I'd be more than happy to direct her to one of my colleagues, who she'd see were all wearing visible HMV shirts. She insisted that I help her anyway, and when I told her no, she flipped her lid and told me she'd be speaking with the manager and that I should be fired. I still can't get over the sense of entitlement some people have. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Around Christmas time, I was on my lunch hour, in my uniform, picking up some Christmas stuff. I was in a card shop and this man in his 60s hit me over the head with a wrapping paper roll as a joke, before apologizing profusely on realizing I was a customer there. Having said that, I don't know why that would ever be considered a thing to do to someone who you don't know, whether they work there or not. I never resolved it. I was 16 and awkward. I was at the PX trying to pick out a rotisserie chicken for dinner when a guy came up to me and began asking where a couple of items were located in the store. Knowing that new people were always incoming, I told him what aisles some of the items were in, but then I said I was sorry for not knowing where one or two of them were located. He then got mad at me and said I should know the layout of where I work, and he was about to walk away angrily when I stopped him. I let him know that the people who work at the store wore a certain uniform, and as I wasn't wearing one, I obviously didn't work there. He still seemed mad and said, "Well, if you didn't look like a stock worker, you wouldn't have had to deal with me asking you questions." And then he walked off. My brother was at Best Buy and was mistaken for an employee because he was wearing a blue shirt. The first time someone asked him where something was, he politely told them he didn't work there, but he did tell them where the product was. The second time this happened, he thought he'd have some fun and pretty much had this guy following him all around the store looking for something my brother had no clue where it was. The guy eventually asked, "Do you even work here?" My brother simply replied, "Nope." The guy stormed out of the store so fast, my brother just went back to what he was doing. One time, my best friend and I were in Walmart digging in the $5 movie bin. We're standing looking at all these crappy movies, hoping to find a gem, when this random lady walks up and asks if we work there. I say, "Sorry ma'am, no we don't," and we continue digging through the bin. Well, this wasn't good enough for this lady. She stands there and asks us something about finding volleyball equipment. I forget exactly what it was she was looking for specifically. I asked if she looked through the sporting goods, which she was standing right in front of, and she says, "Well, yes of course, but I didn't see it. I thought y'all would know where it would be." At this point, my friend and I are both a little frustrated with the situation, so I tell her that we have no idea where else the volleyball equipment would be at the store. I ask if she's gone to Dick's Sporting Goods. That's when all heck broke loose. She raised her voice and started yelling about how she wasn't going to spend that much money and ranting and raving about the cost difference and this and that. My friend and I just looked at each other and walked away. In conclusion, lady wants to know where volleyball equipment is in Walmart and then yells at my friend and I, neither of us work there, for suggesting that she look at a dedicated sporting goods store. The dress code for the company I worked for was this black pullover and the standard dress shoes and trousers. I usually walk up to ASDA or Walmart for lunch and stood for about 5 minutes deciding which sweets or chocolate I should get. As I'm looking, I get a tap on the shoulder. There's a woman standing there and she begins shouting at me, "I have been standing here asking you for help for 5 minutes." I give a weird look and she realizes I don't work at ASDA and she gets embarrassed and walks away. As I'm walking to the till, I notice someone who actually worked at ASDA in kind of the same attire except for that they have an ASDA in big green letters on their jumper. Finally, a place to share my stories. When I was younger, around 14, I used to go shopping with my mother, as I'm sure lots of people do. She told me to wait outside the store while she quickly went in, and I, coincidentally, was wearing a similar outfit to the store clerks. Blue top, grey pants. An older woman walked towards me and practically yelled out that she had gone online and found a product she wanted and demanded that I take her to it. I politely said that I didn't work there and that was the end of it, right? Wrong. She claimed that I had to work there. I was wearing the uniform. I tried to argue otherwise, but she just insisted that I work there, and she'll tell my manager. Eventually, my mum returned and we both left, but I still fill with rage at the thought of this woman. Ma'am, I don't work here. Yes, you do. Oh, okay. A reality-defying level of will to be a Karen on display here. Magnificent and inspiring, a feat of imagination we can all aspire to. Not awkward, but helpful. I noticed every helper in this store was ignoring this elderly lady. I happened to be wearing the same color of shirt and she came up to me for help. I happily helped her and even helped her go to the checkout lane. She tells me I'm a good employee and will write a nice letter to the company about me. A little backstory first. When I was about 11 years old, I went with my family to Philadelphia Zoo. It was about 80 degrees out and little me decided to wear a hoodie for some reason. Of course, I get too hot and need to take it off, but I forgot to wear a shirt underneath, so my parents brought me a shirt that said Philadelphia Zoo on it. So my family and I are walking around the gift shop right before we were about to leave. Little me is checking out some sweet stuffed animals when a middle-aged woman comes up to me and taps me on the shoulder. "Excuse me," she says, "where can I find sunscreen?" I was kind of confused when she asked me, but I was happy to help since she asked politely. I quickly looked around and saw some non-souvenirs behind the counter. I'm guessing you can find it at the counter over there," I said. Then this woman gave me a look like she wasn't sure if I was intelligent or not. "So, you're just guessing?" she says. The way she said it made me realize something was off, but I didn't make the connection. Remember, I'm 11 fricking years old. "Yeah, I mean, there are batteries and stuff back there, so there should be sunscreen." She then gave me a quick smile and said, "Okay, thank you for your help." I didn't have a clue what happened until I told my dad what was happening as we were leaving. He started laughing and pointed out I was wearing the Philadelphia Zoo shirt, and this broad thought I'd worked there. My first day of class, someone thought I was a professor. I was only 20 and I didn't think I looked that old. "You've got to stop wearing the sweaters with the elbow pads, dude." I was on my break and decided to walk down the mall to the Bon, which is now Macy's. I was wandering around seeing what the sales were when I was approached by one of those high and mighty rich witches. She asked where something was and I told her I didn't work there. She got all huffy and stormed away. I went about my browsing. A few minutes later, here she comes again, this time with an actual store employee in tow saying, "That's her. That's the one that won't help me." The employee, actually a department manager, asked me why I was out of my department, and that I knew better than to not help a customer while approached. She then asked what department I was from. Finally, a chance to speak. I replied, "I sell shoes at," where I was promptly interrupted and given another tongue lashing, all while Rich Witch is sitting there with a smirk on her face. Manager told me to go to the office and wait for her. I turned on my heel and walked my way towards the exit doors instead. She catches up to me and loudly demands to know if I wanted to be fired or if I was going to go to the office. I responded, "I'm going to my office." She said there were no offices in that direction and demanded I turn in my name tag and gather my things. I took my name badge off, handed it to them while saying, "I don't think my district manager is going to like you firing this top-selling store manager from Kinney Shoes." She looked down at the name badge and back up at me, white as a sheet. Manager hands my badge back, mumbled an apology, and scurried away with her embarrassment and this rich witch. There's a lesson in this. Take your name badge off when you're on a break and go to other stores. While at my aunt's funeral, I was wearing my black suit. Hair was looking presentable, but my shoes were two different sizes and brands. Apparently, I looked like I worked at that funeral home. Probably because I was standing off to the side because I only knew 3 out of the 50 people there, including my aunt. Anyway, I was asked at least twice if I worked there or where this thing was by, who else, family members I'd never met. They thought it was funny after I told them. I still don't know who they are. I was in Normandy, France at one of the landing beaches and some American tourists thought I was a tour guide. Me, being the kind of person I am, went along with it and started teaching them about the beach's history and telling them good places to visit. I'd only been there for an hour, but I did know the history rather well. I continued talking to them through the landing and taking questions, and then the tour guide turned up. I just laughed and walked away, and they thanked me in a confused manner. I don't think it dawned on them at that precise moment I was a random guy and not a tour guide. This has happened to me more than once. When I was a paramedic, I'd just finished my shift and popped into the grocery store to grab something quick for dinner breakfast. Apparently, an older woman's eyesight was off that day because she thought I worked there. Grocery store employees don't dress at all like a paramedic, but whatever. I helped her load a few frozen chickens into her cart. She thanked me profusely and wanted to get my name so she could tell my manager what a great employee I am. So I gave her the name and number of my supervisor. The next Monday, my supervisor calls me into his office and asked me to explain this voicemail. "Hello, my name is Old Woman. I just wanted to say that you have one of the finest employees in the entire grocery store. He helped me load all the chickens I needed for my potluck into my cart immediately and without hesitation. He was so kind and generous with his time and blah blah blah." His voicemail actually cut her off. The message was so long, so she called back and left a second voicemail just to finish her praise. My supervisor just stared at me. I stared back. We never spoke of it again. I think he was of the opinion that I was moonlighting as some sort of grocery store chicken-loading demigod. What companies have lost your business forever? Bank of America. Loyal customer for 10 years. Insulted time and time again. First with their bullcrap service fee for monthly auto-pay transactions, then I had to get a replacement debit card, which took way too long. I called to check on it, and a woman on the line said they'd never sent one out. So, very annoyed, I got another one. This card finally came, and I went to ATM to activate it, and it didn't work. Called back, and apparently this was the first card I'd ordered, which was now rendered useless because the second card, which was still in the mail, was now associated with my account. Got very irate, but remained polite with the woman on the line and was basically told there was nothing they could do. Still stuck with them. Fast forward to a different state a few months later. I got a call and I was told my account had been compromised. Was given some vague explanation about mass data theft, but basically told they had to deactivate my card and send me a new one. I told them how inconvenient this was, and they suggest I go to a branch to get a new card. I do this, and they say since my account was opened in a different state, they can't give me a temp card, and that I have to wait 5 to 7 business days again. Woman at the branch is nice and enters my new address, then calls the branch in Texas to get them to send me a new card. 5 to 7 days, no card. Call and find out that the card was sent to my old address in Texas because my address hasn't been updated, which is total bullcrap. I lose it. I don't scream, but I do ask her several pointed questions including, when is this company going to get its crap together? Which resulted in the rep acting as though I was the worst person in the world for swearing whilst frustrated and threatening to hang up. I apologize for swearing and then ask what they can do. Again, I'm basically told, tough crap, and that she can send me a new card and I can wait without one for another 5 to 7 days. I pause, think about it for 3 solid seconds and say, close my account, I'm done with your company. Short story? F Bank of America. HP. When my laptop was having overheating problems, the woman on the customer service line fricking lied and said my warranty had expired even though I had multiple pieces of evidence showing that I had about a month left on my warranty. They were going to charge me $250 to fix the problem. I had to spend hours on the phone with various customer service associates just to get them to resolve the warranty issue. Luckily, I ended up fixing the overheating without shipping out my laptop, but still, F HP. I really like my laptop, but I'm never buying anything from them again after the bullcrap treatment I got. Currently on my HP, it can fry an egg because it gets so overheated. Also, it sounds like a vacuum cleaner built for a squirrel because of the fan. This story is 11 years old, and we don't know if HP have got better, but I can testify that my first PC from them was met with a similar level of customer service, namely telling me to try the same update that had disabled my PC's audio every prior time I'd installed it to fix my freezing problem. PayPal, because they almost managed to mess up my overseas vacation. Long story short, at the time, still, they flagged and locked your account if you tried using their service in a different country than the one your verified address is located in. Fine. Banks sometimes do that too if you don't warn them you're traveling in advance. Where PayPal failed is in their unblocking process. You needed to input a secret code sent to either your verified phone or your verified address, both of which were inaccessible to me because I was halfway around the fricking world. Priceline.com, because 45 minutes away from the airport is not an airport area hotel. I avoid PayPal whenever possible, but it's hard to when a lot of online stores don't take anything else. A guy bought my PS2 and kept telling me to tell him when the PS2 was on its way. I sent the PS2 and updated the buyer. He immediately filed an unauthorized PayPal transaction dispute, which basically means he claimed that someone used his PayPal account without his permission, so he wanted his money returned. I explained what happened. I had the email conversation with the scammer saved and I had a postage receipt, but PayPal wouldn't have any of it. Fortunately, I never post anything until the money is in my bank account, so I didn't lose anything. My PayPal account remained locked, and they wanted me to repay them for refunding the scammer. Yeah, right. Now I just use my girlfriend's account when they're the only payment option. GameStop. They just cannot compete with Steam or GOG.com for PC games. GameStop sucks, but for console games and hardware, you can get it all early if the manager knows how to work the company and will for you. Free 7 days on used games. I beat the game in 7 days and then return it, though I suppose it isn't giving them great business. Best Buy. When an object on sale rung up at the wrong price, I asked them to change it to what the shelf said. The cashier said she couldn't, so I asked her to call the manager to change it then. The manager came over and said, "That's the price." I said, "Well, let's walk over to the shelf and I'll show you the posted price." He said, "No, and we don't want your business." So I got mad and asked for the senior manager, at which point he told the cashier to call the police. I was like, "I've done nothing wrong, call them." They came and were like, "Yeah, he's a complete butthole, but he did ask you to leave, and if you don't, you're trespassing." So I asked the cop for his contact info and then contacted Best Buy Corporate and explained it, provided the manager's name and cop's name, and they sent me a $200 gift card as an apology. But I was done with Best Buy. I gave it to a family member for Christmas, since this happened a couple of weeks before Christmas a few years ago. They were very pleased. Burger King. Almost every time I've gotten food poisoning in my life, it's been from BK. I've had crap service many times as well, but the final straw was that I wanted the spicy chicken sandwich thing with extra sauce on it. The last couple of times, there was barely any of the spicy orange sauce on it. I opened the box it was in, and the fricking thing was swimming with the sauce. Not just extra sauce, but the sandwich was a soggy mess of chicken, bun, and sauce. It was completely inedible. I complained to the manager and he said, "Well, you wanted extra sauce." F you. Sony. Not because of stupid hacking, because they used to be a great engineering company, and then sold out and got into music and movie creation. They started to hobble their devices. Then, they put rootkits on their CDs. They became complete scum. AT&T. I was told I could have UVerse high-speed internet in my apartment. They ship me a router. I leave everything in the box and wait for the installer to get there because I have a funny feeling, which turned out to be correct. The installer shows up, informs me the lines haven't been updated and I can't get UVerse. Disappointed, I take the prepaid UPS sticker out of the box they shipped me, slap it on the box, tape it back up, and ship it back. A month later, I get a bill in the mail for the router. I call and spend a lot of time confirming they indeed got the router and was assured the billing system just hadn't been caught up yet. So I thought it was over. Nope. Months later, I start getting calls from a collection company. AT&T sold my debt to them. I spend more time, oodles of time, telling them that they have the damn router and to call off their hired goons. Ended up sending the goons a certified letter to cease and desist. Everything was quiet. I thought it was over. Nope. A few months later, I start getting calls and letters from another collection agency. Collection agency number 1 sold it to a different collection agency. This time I pitch a fit. I call AT&T. I tweet AT&T reps on Twitter. I raise a heck of a stink, and finally, the calls stop. I think it's over. Nope! I start getting collection letters for $14. Apparently they took off the $89 to $100 for the router they'd been wanting to charge me, but still wanted me to pay the fee the collection agency tacks on to make the debt worth their while. So I call AT&T and they have the fricking nerve to say they'll have to investigate and see if I owe the fee or not. God. Needless to say, I spent many hours on this over the year and I'll never get that back. AT&T, go F yourselves, forever, in the dark with a chainsaw. There was a pizza place near my campus. The middle-aged owner was always there hitting on drunken girls late at night. While that didn't bother me, what did was that any time I tried to order, he brushed me off, like I was distracting him from his flirting. Very rude and arrogant. His employee was incredibly nice and served me. But the fact that it happened more than once, and the fact that there are 3 more pizza places on the same block, well, screw that guy. I mean, I'm more annoyed at the implication of a sober, dirty old man hitting on inebriated girls, but hey, you get teed off by what tees you off, my dude. Canadian here. Rogers, based on many bad experiences and principle. Bell, on principle alone. Quiznos. So, had a coupon for a free sub. I ordered it, and they wouldn't validate the damn thing. Apparently Kellogg's or whatever cereal I got the coupon from did it without their permission, which I find really hard to believe. Anyway, I was starving and they'd made me the sandwich, and I felt guilty, so I paid for the darn thing, even though I was broke and it was like $10. It was burnt, just a mess of bread and sauce and crap all over, and just straight up fricking disgusting. I don't know how anyone can stand them, I was so mad. Went back just to meet my sister a few days later though, and she had ordered a drink already. Free refills. So we just hung out there, shared the drink and refilled it like 20 times. Vengeance. Not really. I'll never go back. Air France. What a shower of rude and incompetent, snobby jerks in general. I was stuck in Paris 2 years ago at Christmas because of snow. They had nobody working the desks anywhere. They booked me into a hotel room that didn't exist, so I left the warm departure lounge for the freezing entrance. A member of staff told me to F off when I asked when the customer service desk would open, and they literally had one check-in desk open to deal with all the rearranged flights in their own fricking airport. They then lost my luggage for the whole 3 weeks I was home and refused any compensation claim. Oh yeah, and the morons will speak French to you on a Paris to Tokyo flight and be angry when you need to switch to English. So I started replying in Japanese, ya funny boys. Ulta. Too many snobs. God, me too. I found a great price on an epilator at Ulta online. Went to the store and found it was $25 more expensive. Asked the sales girl about it and she stood there seriously for about 5 minutes, scratching her head and being all, "Oh my god, that's so weird, I can't believe, it's a different price. How weird is that? It's so random, oh my god." I had to actually walk away and find someone who looked less stupid, but couldn't find anyone, so left and I bought the epilator at Target instead. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not exactly relevant anymore since they closed down years ago, but before that point, Circuit City. I've had 2 horrible experiences with them, and after the second time, I swore to never go back there again. Shortly after the GameCube came out, I was searching all around town for one. I called them up and they said they had a whole bunch in stock. We drove over there, about a 10-minute drive, and not only did they not have any, they hadn't had any for days and wouldn't be getting any for several more days. The day Xenosaga Episode 3 came out, I walked around town to try and find a copy. Circuit City said they had a few copies, and they'd save one for me. We took that same 10-minute drive out there, and I find the guy I spoke with and he opens a drawer and pulls out Xenosaga Episode 2. I tell him, no, I wanted Episode 3. His reply, this is 3. No, it's not. Yeah, it is. That's 2. Whatever, man, it's the same thing anyway, right? So are you gonna buy it? No, I'm looking for 3. I have 2. But this is the same thing? You're an idiot. And so I left, never to return. Dell. 4 years ago, I had some expensive Dell XPS laptop that started getting randomly hot, so I called Dell's customer support. They tell me nothing is wrong, then hang up on me. A few weeks later, my laptop won't turn on. I call customer support again, but this time they send someone out to look at the laptop. The motherboard was cracked, so they just replace it, but the laptop was still getting really hot. 14-year-old me thinks that the fans are broken, shocker, right? But they insist that nothing is wrong. Long story short, they end up replacing my motherboard, RAM, and hard drive over the next few visits, but they still insist the laptop just gets hot. At this point, it's not the same laptop, so I keep asking Dell for a new one, since this one just doesn't work. They won't replace it, but my mum finds out where I live. Dell has been sued and lost multiple times for using faulty parts and so on. We bring that up, and a few weeks later there's a $4,500 Alienware laptop sitting at my door that they sent me for free. My friend still wonders why I tell him to never buy from Dell and just offer to help them build their own PCs instead. Walmart. I don't hate capitalism or large corporations, but Walmart represents everything that is wrong with American capitalism and corporate culture. Yeah, this would be my answer too. There are so many things wrong with it that I can't even point out which is most important. They treat their workers horribly, their customers horribly, they do illegal crap overseas and use sweatshops to make their prices so low. They put smaller companies out of business and ruin livelihoods in the process. And they mess up the economy so that it has to rely on all these horrible facets. They're terrible on every level. I can't boycott every company that does anything wrong, but holy crap, if you're gonna pick one to boycott, it should be this one. It doesn't cover the same issues, just the symptoms, but feel free to enjoy our old video, Store Workers and Customers, What's Your People of Walmart Story, on this channel to hear what this mega corporation turns people into. Capital 1. They kept losing my payments, my online payments, so I'm not sure how you can lose those. 100 times this. Years ago, I had a credit card with them. It had a balance of around $600. I called to let them know I was canceling it. I planned to pay it off over a few months at $150 a month. At the time, I was reasonably well off, so I paid most of my bills on autopilot. After 9 months, I realized I was still paying it off, and that didn't make sense. I checked my balance. With no new charges and paying $150 a month, my balance was now over $1,000. I called them and went through all kinds of people before I found out what was happening. They had literally made up charges on my account. I knew the charges were fake because I'd already cancelled the card. These fake charges were putting me repeatedly over my limit, with a $40 over-limit charge each time this happened. Once I realized this and threatened legal action, they realized it was a computer error, and that your account is fine. They apologized for the mistake and I thought I was done with it. 10 years later, I started getting calls trying to collect on a $1,500 balance. Whenever I get such a call, I simply tell them, that account was paid in full and on time and you have been defrauded. I generally don't hear anything for about a year at a time now. Target Photo Center. They had an ad that when you sign up, you got 50 free prints. So I made an account and ordered 50 pictures for my 21-year-old cousin's funeral picture board. I show up and the trashy lady tried to charge me for all the prints. When I ask to see a manager, she just laughs and walks away. And it wasn't the first time I had a bad experience there. Apple. I work in IT, so I will never understand paying more money for less functionality, less hardware flexibility, and proprietary connectors. Nexon. As for gaming, worst company I have ever bought virtual points for. I spent about $600 in 2 years for that game, and their customer service was pretty much non-existent. You'd send a complaint, a ticket, and you'd get an immediate response, "We're busy, we may not get to your ticket for a while." And 6 months later you'd get a response, but nothing would be accomplished. So you'd send another complaint and it's just a horrible experience. 0 out of 10 would never buy from again. Nikon. I got one of their PowerShot cameras and I had it for about 8 months. I didn't get it wet, I didn't drop it. Basically, I kept it in ideal condition, but the LCD screen still broke. So I sent it to them just to have it fixed. Keep in mind it was still under warranty, so repairs should have been free. A few weeks later, they sent me an email that basically said, "Yeah, we'll fix it." For $100? Hell no! That was almost half the price of the camera. Switched back to Canon and haven't looked back. After watching Food Inc., I haven't bought one Tyson product. It's been nearly 2 years and I've continued to buy free range and as much organic stuff as I can. Coming from someone who makes minimum wage, it's hard to afford, but I refuse to support crap companies like Tyson. Their plant, anti-union bias, active recruiting in poverty-stricken countries, and pollution have ruined my hometown. You can smell my town 15 miles away. What makes me more mad, though, is how my hometown bent over backward to accommodate them. Lexington, Nebraska is run by the "money? Yes" idea of government, and it leads to a smelly, broke, corrupt as crap rural Nebraskan town. Lenovo. Like a month ago, I ordered a laptop with them. Due to finding a better deal online, I decided to purchase a different laptop. Before I spent the money, I cancelled the order with Lenovo. Unlike something like Amazon where you can cancel it online, I had to call and I had to talk with someone who I could barely understand. Thick foreign accent. 45 minutes later, I thought I'd cancelled the order. The man told me it would take 3 to 5 days and they'd send me an email. 7 days later, I got the email. Another 4 days after that, and I was charged the $800 for the laptop, despite only having $500 in my account, overdrafting 3 pending purchases. Another 2 hours on the phone with my bank and Lenovo, and I was promised a full refund within 24 to 48 hours. Those passed and nothing happened. I called again and they said the order had already shipped. It shipped weeks after I cancelled the order? So I had to wait until it arrived and refuse the order. Today, a week or so after that, and I've still got nothing in my account, despite them continually saying like within 3 business days and in 24 hours. I still don't have any money, but Wells Fargo is on my side at least. In summary, screw Lenovo. They charged me for an order since it shipped over a week after I cancelled it, and have taken 3 weeks and still haven't given me back the money I desperately need and have incurred about $100 of fees due to overdrafts on. Well, since I've already complained about HP, I'll say that in my one instance of complaint to Lenovo, they were a lot better about it and refunded. But then again, their crappy laptop had electrocuted me, so maybe they got off easy for that. VMware. I purchased an academic license of Workstation 9 from them, and I needed another for my other computer. It's only a per-computer license. Nowhere on the academic site did it say you could only buy one academic copy. Their website errored out on purchase, telling me that my email address was already registered when I tried to buy the second license for Workstation while already logged in. I contacted support, and after a month of runaround and my pointing out that I had an academic project coming due that required the second license, they told me that I could only get one academic license for Workstation, which was stated nowhere on their site. I then requested my support ticket to be escalated due to them giving me the runaround, and they suggested using an alternate email to purchase the software. You need an EDU email to get the academic version, and it's kind of hard to get a second EDU email. I'm not dealing with their bullcrap anymore, not after that one. If they wanted to say you can only buy one copy of Workstation on academic license within even the first week of the ticket, that's one thing, but to mess me around for a month while I have academic work coming due that requires the second license and then give me the bird after a month of messing me around, screw them. Business in Australia called Harvey Norman's. I'll never shop there because the guy who runs it, Jerry Harvey, is a huge whiner who always wants the government to tax this or ban that because his business is hard to run in the current economic conditions. It's called capitalism, mate. Just because you had some boom times doesn't mean it'll last forever. Adapt or die. Sears. While working there for a year and a half, I came to the conclusion that they don't care about their customers or their employees. Those are great examples of how they like to mess over everyone. I hated working there, and I can't believe the one I worked at is still open. We'd have 5 customers all night, and then managers would yell at us for not getting 5 people to join the rewards program or get a credit card. They told us to lie about the rewards program and to sign people up without them knowing. They wanted us to ask for their phone numbers and emails and sign them up without telling them why. It was so stressful. A woman had been working there for 25-ish years and was only making 9-something an hour. I was sick of going home and crying every night, and I was sick of being threatened with losing my job. Before I quit, my manager informed me that the store manager did not want me there. I worked hard and I was great with customers, but I wouldn't lie or sweet-talk people into something they really didn't want, so they drove me to quit. What be some of the strangest things about life on the high seas? Things can get much heavier quickly because the floor is moving. Machinery running within steel walls will destroy your hearing, and fire is very, very scary. The most dangerous thing out there, weirdly. In the case of the US Navy, we had a dedicated at-sea fire party. This was made up of damage control men and hull technicians. We would be the first responders in any sort of fire, flooding, or toxic gas situations, including reactor emergencies. We would fight the fire until we either A, put it out, or B, it would get out of control and the ship would then go into general quarters, battle stations. Then the rest of the crew would meet in their predetermined areas and help fight the fire or flooding. The ship is broken into sections that have repair lockers, think mini fire stations, with all the equipment to fight. When the fire is initially called away, the fire party will respond to the closest repair locker and then gear up and move out from there. In a GQ scenario, each repair locker is manned by the entire crew. Every few feet in the ship, on every deck and level, is a fire plug with a hose and nozzles. The hoses are fed by seawater that we've pumped in and loops at a constant 150 psi. The ship is designed in a manner that sections can be closed off with watertight doors and fire-tight doors. That way, you can keep it isolated. In the case that the fire is burning so intensely that we can't make entry to actually fight the fire, you'd go into the compartment above or below or next to and spray the decks or overhead to try and keep the heat from becoming so intense that it lights off another fire. As a hull technician, I did extensive training both before the fleet and during the fleet. On the ship, the fire party trains and runs drills several times a week, and the GQ drill at least once a week in my cases. In the fire party, we have all of our positions that we know to go to immediately, like nozzle man, team leader, scene leader, plug man, plotter, etc. The main thing is don't let fires happen. It's the #1 killer for us out there, so a lot of time and effort goes into prevention. In conclusion, put the wet stuff on the hot stuff. When you get off the boat, you don't actually feel off the boat for sometimes a week. Vertigo is real nasty. I never got seasick ever. My first time being on a boat was for a month. Then getting off in Portugal, I got land sick. It was a bummer. Trying to compensate for waves that don't exist, my father made his living back in the day repairing old fishing ships for recreational use, so I spent a lot of time at sea. I've fallen out of the shower at home after being out for a few months. You get used to the ship rolling and your body adapts and sways to compensate. When you're back on land, it can take a few days to reorient yourself. You can be showering and not realize you're swaying. Before you know it, you're on your butt with the shower curtain wrapped around you and a bump on your head from the curtain rod. As a man who can trip over on an unimpeded straight walk with no help from vertigo, the narrator is beginning to think he should never ever go on a long voyage. I've always slept better at sea. I think the rolling of the ship has something to do with it. I always enjoyed the rough weather. Everyone seems to be in a better, cooperative mood due to the shared experience, like how neighbors all pull together in a big snowstorm. I spent a lot of my childhood at sea with my dad, and one thing I always remember about sleeping on the water is the sound of barnacles. My bunk was right up in the bow and right against the hull at water level, and you could hear them eating at night. To those who haven't heard it, they snap their beak things closed when they catch plankton, or at least that's what I assumed was happening. And there's like 1 billion of these things living on the outside of the boat, so you can hear this constant multitude of faint clicks, almost like rain. It's a soothing noise. I miss it. That sounds both so gross and so soothing. You can become very disoriented from being surrounded by nothing but water. You get to see so much of the world, but 70% of it is water. We joined the Navy to see the world, and what did we see? We saw the sea. If you wanted to join the other 30%, you should have joined the army like a real man. The constant movement. Plus, if you're standing watches, you never get enough steady sleep, and you're only half there after 2 or 3 days. You'll find yourself dozing off on your feet. Also, when you eat, keep a hand on your plate. Probably how beautiful the stars are and how frightening the sea gets during a storm. The only time I've ever really seen the Milky Way was in the open ocean at night. We were going back to our rental house in the Bahamas. I was about 14 and had no idea what I was looking at. I didn't understand when my sister told me it was the Milky Way, but it made a huge impression on me. Electronic communications technician here, aboard a submarine. I control all the information going on or off our boat. I establish secure communication with satellites and other ships. I love it, and I wouldn't want to do any other job in the Navy. Getting fresh fruit and vegetables is very rare. Going months without sunlight screws with your head, but your body still knows when it's time to go to bed anyway. We make our own water and air, but from time to time we'll come to the surface for some fresh air. At that point, no one can sleep because the O2 levels just shot up. The ocean is bigger and deeper than you think. It's amazing how much contrast the water has from port to port. The blue water in the Pacific is unlike anything I've ever seen on TV or in magazines. It's beautiful and vast. You have to see it from the deck of a submarine to grasp it. So, when there's a storm, how far underwater are the effects of it seen? For that matter, is there ever turbulence of any kind from things like currents or thermoclines? It depends on how bad the sea state is. I've been pretty deep under a bad storm and we were rocking a bit. We try to go around what we can if they're really bad. Kind of a different perspective here. I served in the US Navy for some time aboard an aircraft carrier. Fresh water is a precious resource, so showers are a bit different. You don't get in and stand under running water. It's essentially a hose with a button on the side of the nozzle. The steps for taking a shower are as follows. 1. Get wet. 2. Soap and wash. 3. Rinse. You work 12 hours, then 12 hours off. It's a loud environment and the ship shakes and shudders often during flight operations. Sometimes to get from point A to point B on the ship requires going up and down several ladders or stairs. My dad is the captain of a 4-story tugboat in the Gulf of Mexico. They putter along at 2 to 6 knots from Brownsville to somewhere in Florida and anywhere in between, pushing up to, I think, 12 or 20 barges. He spends 2 weeks on the ship and 1 week off. He hates it. His deckhands play video games and watch cartoons in the galley. If anything, he probably enjoys yelling when that happens. He has to wake up at noon, sleep at 6 p.m., wake back up at midnight, and go back to sleep by 6 a.m. This is so a relief captain can take over for half of the day. That order reverses on the second week. Deckhands cook the food. The only good food they can make is Neiman Marcus cake, which is very rich. He's home now for a week. I'd get him on Reddit to tell his stories in his own words, but he refuses to get on here. He'd rather get his news from the television. Point is, he hates working on that ship, but that's all he knows how to do. When you start off on a boat, you're a deckhand. You're the captain's whipping boy. You'll run many miles a day on a ship with wet-painted steel floors. Be expected to lift 100 pounds straight up 8 feet, no problem. Chance of man overboard. Pays very well, and you can get a job as a deckhand almost any time with no experience. There you go. If narration ever fails me, I can follow the call of the sea, lift 100 pounds several times a day, break my back, and fall overboard. That's the life. Royal Navy here. I love the fact that on the upper deck of one's ship, looking out to sea, you're seeing what sailors 100, 200, 500, and 1,000 years ago saw. The exact same. Now go to a Roman ruin and look at it. That's not what they saw. I love that, even though it's just waves and stuff. I worked on a cruise ship for a year. There are many things that I could mention. Most likely that you'll have no windows in your room. This is quite disorienting if you feel movement all the time but can't see what's going on. Internet is spotty and expensive. The ship moves, sometimes a lot. There are seriously passengers who don't understand this tiny fact. Everything can be dangerous. As the first guy said, fire is the main enemy of a ship. People all train constantly for disasters when they work and live at sea. This training could be hit or miss, but every bigger ship has the systems in place to save lives if something happens. But not just for fire. Trainings are held for bombs, evacuation, and other things. That said, everything is beautiful. Life is basically full of beautiful sunsets and sunrises, and amazing beaches and cultures in between. Your shipmates will have interesting and crazy lives that you will learn about intimately, whether you want to or not. Life at sea is obviously vastly different for someone sailing a small boat than for someone working as one of an 800 crew member on a cruise ship, but I do highly recommend doing it if you have the opportunity. I loved it. The stress from being out there alone, working in harsh conditions with the same people over and over every day. Some people got into fistfights, some people were just so agitated they wanted to be left alone. But a lot of us made jokes and tried to have fun. My favorite part was going out into the middle of the night and seeing all the stars. So many stars with no artificial lights to block them. And when we went to Alaska, we saw the northern lights. It was amazing to see the lights reflected off the water. I had pictures, but my camera was stolen. I was in the Navy and life at sea had become very routine. We were at sea for almost 3 months straight during a deployment. We, most of us, had standard working hours during the day. The guys in the engine room were 6 hours on, 6 off. We stood watch, ate, watched movies, and did whatever else we could to stay busy. Other than drills and actual emergencies, not much changes day to day. I always enjoyed smoking cigarettes at night. The smoke boxes, as we called them, were one of the only places we could be outside at night. Navy ships run dark at night with no outside lights or white lights above the main deck. The smell of the ocean, the sound of the ship moving through the water, and the stars in the sky was something that I'll never forget. It was a different lifestyle that I really fell in love with. Yeah, parts of it sucked, but it sure beats sitting in a cubicle all day. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I've done a couple of hitches on a traditional Arctic schooner. The concept of privacy is very different. In some cases, the only personal space you have is a 6-foot by 3-foot bunk for sleeping in and storing all your stuff. So you get very close to the people around you, otherwise it's miserable. You also get used to there being no real free time. Your schedule is usually 6 hours on and 6 hours off, so you have limited time to eat and sleep before your next watch. Also, fresh water is only for drinking, so you take a lot of deck baths despite how cold it is. But it's also beautiful out there on the water. I've gotten to hear a whale song through the boards of my bunk as well as above the water. I've seen humpback whales breaching only 50 feet away from me during bow watch. It's an experience that very little can match. I found it interesting that after a few days, sea salt starts congealing on everything, even though you can't see ocean spray hitting it. The rain is nice because it cleans it off and you can sit down or hold railings without getting salt all over you for a few days. Time can get monotonous. You become like a dog, in that you look forward to lunch and dinner because that's about the most exciting part of the day. Your ratio of sunsets watched will skyrocket because after dinner you don't have anything to do really but smoke cigs and shoot the crap while watching the sunset. They're pretty amazing though, better than their land counterparts. Also, the stars at night. I've seen the Milky Way so bright that it was reflecting off the ocean. It's worth noting that experiences of working at sea will differ greatly, depending on what kind of vessel you're on, your position, rank, where you operate, and how long you spend away from home. I'd say it's the latter that most people will agree on, being away from home. This will vary from 4 months to 10 months a year for people. I do approximately 8 months away a year, 2 to 3 month contracts. Spending a large proportion of your time away from friends and family will change your life. You'll lose touch with people, relationships will be tough, and there's going to be a majority chance that you'll miss any wedding, funeral, or holiday. But those are the terms and conditions we all signed up for knowing this, although maybe not understanding it fully. As a trade, we do get benefits which one needs to decide themselves if they outweigh the negatives. Maybe not answering the question, but it's just my 2 cents. Of course, this time away would be a massive factor. Part of me wonders if it would have been worth it to do this for a few years immediately after I'd left high school to save up some money before uni, but there might be better options for gaining other skills too. Guys from the third world make up the majority of seafarers on UK-flagged ships, so most ship owners can cut costs. They're penny pinchers. 95% of all trade is done by sea. Most ships don't have internet, so it can be isolating. Most UK ships tend not to be registered in the UK for this reason. 90% of vessels I served on were registered in the Bahamas. You tickle your pickle any chance of solitude you get. Thus the main reason to keep those shower shoes handy. If you're on a smallish boat, how difficult day-to-day tasks can get. Making a cup of coffee in the galley without a window or small porthole in rough seas can be quite the challenge. Pouring anything with liquid in the galley is very, very difficult. It's just so easy to get everything everywhere. Try getting dressed in cramped quarters constantly being buffeted from one side to the other. Or taking a crap or a pee, you'll have to watch the level in the toilet and flush before it runs over the edge onto you in a rogue wave. The intimacy on board on most boats, there's very little privacy. You live with your crew every waking moment. You have to be very comfortable with yourself and not be easily bothered. Going upstairs in high seas is a real crapshoot. 1 second you feel like you weigh 3 times as much as usual, and then the next second you're lighter than air. Sea legs don't tend to disappear. I've been off the ship for about 6 years now, and I still walk with a swagger, apparently. Sleeping in high seas is nigh impossible. You'll flop about with the ship, and starfishing doesn't help after Force 10. Polish sailors will drink anything. Filipino sailors will hide everything everywhere. They also love singing Sinatra on karaoke. Often the cook is also a deckhand, so if it's been a busy day, prepare for crap food. Cargo watch sucks, deck watch sucks, it all sucks. Cue the gay jokes. Fresh milk is more important than nicotine for keeping the crew and officers from killing each other. The chief officer will always drink, even on a dry ship. A ship doesn't normally dictate its culture, the captain does. A crappy captain is crappy for everyone. Testing lifeboats is fun, getting an infection is not. Day trippers are fricking morons who don't follow the rules of the road. I'm not moving? Oh really? I've got 9,000 tons of steel and 4,500 bhp that says differently. Counting lighthouse flashes is quite fun. Anchor watch is the best. You sit on the bridge and you read and you smoke. You'll hear a lot of gay jokes. Sunny FM is the best place in the world. Duty-free cigs, booze, adult magazines, and knives. That's it. 5 litres of vodka, €3. 200 Marlboro, €2. German dungeon smut, 3 for 99 cents. Basically, money. I come from 6 generations of seamen, all with the same goal in life. Catch fish, sell them, get drunk, and get laid. Maybe not work, but I've spent more time on water than most. I've spent a year on my sailboat sailing down from Vancouver to Mexico and then cruising in Mexico for 6 months, most of it single-handed. It's not all sunshine and beer. When you're out there and things start to suck, it's not like you can go home. In the 1800s and the early 1900s, seafarers were idolized because everyone knew someone close that went to sea for a living. There was more understanding of what the working conditions were like among the general population. Now, people that go to sea are in a huge minority. People don't know anymore what it's like out there at sea. You don't know the bone-chilling cold there is at night in the North Pacific before the continental shelf drops. Hint, it pushes cold water up from the bottom of the sea to the top. You don't know what it's like to be out there in 12-foot sea with less than 6-second periods. That freaking sucks. You don't know what it's like to have monster waves at night that you can't see until they're right on top of you. You don't know what it's like to be in a shipping lane at night in the fog without radar. Yes, I'm stupid for that last one. But there's nothing so freeing as being alone out on deck on dog watch on a cold night with your cheeks cold and your nose slightly stuffed from watching the stars play in the night sky. Your only steering guide, the red-lit compass in front of you. But being out there on deck, slightly cold steering ship at night and seeing the stars dissolve into dawn is an amazing sight. I'd trade many a stormy night for that experience. Then there's also the relief of finally coming into harbour after an insane storm when everything is wet. You, your gear, your sleeping bag, your bunk, the whole boat. The feeling when you tie up, everyone gets their wet gear off and you sit in the saloon and make dinner while everyone is sore and tired. Arr. The feeling of seeing land for the first time in a long time. Approaching an island or a coastline doesn't look populated at all, just indescribably beautiful and innocent. Once you're within a mile or so, humanity and the scope of it takes over. Ah yes, the beautiful world, an accident of cosmic proportions or the hand of some divine being in all its glory, laid out for your own oh crap, there are the people. Damn. The shower water can be really hard and it will dry out your skin. Also, if you get hurt or family problems, toothache, or any other unplanned reason you need to get back to the beach, it can take hours to mobilize a chopper to get you. Then the travel time out could be hours and then back again. I work as an instrument technician on a production platform. The work is generally pretty easy, but sometimes it can be stressful and difficult at times. For example, working on big equipment with heavy wrenches, working with government inspectors, working in 90 degrees Fahrenheit plus 90% humidity in direct sunlight in your FRC overalls. You're working on equipment that if it fails can kill people or cause millions of dollars in deferred production. The work schedule is 14 on and 14 off as well. We're a lucky platform as we have two-man rooms, bunks, with our own bathroom as well. It's like a little hotel. We have satellite TV and Wi-Fi on the platform. I'm offshore right now. The funniest part is working and living with the same 50 guys every 2 weeks. They become your other family and your best friends. The food ranges from terrible to decent depending on the cook and how far away from the last food delivery you are. No beer or booze allowed. Dangers? Lots. Mostly from the process. Flammable hydrocarbons under pressure and physical dangers, falling from high places and crap falling on you. Much less chemical dangers than working at a refinery or chemical plant though. I don't like it that much. Being away from my significant other and daughter sucks, but the ratio of what I get paid to the actual amount of work I do is kind of silly. If I could find a land job that paid this much, I'd do it, but I'm making $120K plus now. I was on a carrier and a couple of things come to mind. 1. Life at sea is like the movie Groundhog Day. It's literally the same thing day in and day out, but every now and then you'll hit a port and go have a blast. 2. Don't be the dirty guy. Most sailors have to live in small compartments with upwards of 80 or so other people. Take a shower and change your sheets. 3. A person that you normally wouldn't be attracted to will eventually look like a supermodel the longer you're out at sea. It's a condition called boat goggles, and can only be cured by a port visit. 4. You work with people you like and quite a few that you hate. But if anyone needs your help, you give it without question because you're all alone out there. 5. Find a way to break the monotony. Many people work out, play cards, and take classes. I took 3 college classes while out at sea, just had to pay for the books. It helped me out when I left the Navy for college. I served on board a very small, independently deployed US Navy ship for almost 5 years. Just adding to what I read. We became a family. The old man was our dad, the XO was our nagging mum. We spent long nights up on watch, talking about some of the most intimate stuff guys can talk about. I'm a New Yorker and I got to spend quality time with Mormons, rednecks from Georgia, brothers from Mississippi, weirdos from Cali, Filipinos, etc. As those times got further in my rearview mirror, I got out like 15 years ago, and that's what I think I miss the most. Never thought I'd miss the balls to four and the crappy coffee. Teachers, what's the funniest thing to come out of one of your students' mouths? My first grade class was learning the word powerful. Kids came up with examples of powerful things and people, like elephants and Superman. Then one boy said, "Babies are powerful because they can cry and get whatever they want." "Teacher, I need a pencil." "Where do the pencils live?" "I have a bucket of sharpened pencils for them to use." "Pennsylvania?" I'm a teacher in Canada, told the kids to name me 5 US states and their row could go out for recess first. A boy raised his hand and said, "Rattlesnake?" "What? Oh, snakes. No, states. Name 5 states." T-bone?" "You're naming steaks." "States. States." Resource teacher was in the room and we were crying laughing.
Gas, liquid, solid, plasma, Bose-Einstein condensate.
In 7th grade on a test, the question was, why do some people see technology as positive and others see the same technology as a problem? And a kid simply put,
because some people are Amish?
I remember in year 3 we had to answer a logic question about why there might be uneven amounts of shoes at the door. I'd recently watched Titanic for the first time, so decided to write, one person might be a one-legged working girl. It helped that my mum was a parent helper that day. I'm a white guy teaching ESL in Asia. My students were tasked to complete, the old man's hair was as white as blank. One student asked if she could write down my name in that spot. Phys ed teacher here. I always wear shorts while teaching. Parent-teacher conferences roll around and a grade 1 student comes up to me with her parents.
Mr. Smith, I've never seen you wear pants before.
I've never responded quicker to a comment before in my life to clear that up. Reminds me of when my wife worked in an undisclosed location women's shelter. My daughter wanted to see where mummy worked, but we could never go. I was picking up my daughter from school when she said, in the middle of the crowded school hall,
Daddy, can we finally go and visit Mommy in the shelter? This reminds me of my nephew when he was 3. We dropped his mom, my sister, off at work, where she met a colleague outside and went inside with him. Back at home, my nephew reported to everyone that he'd seen Mommy go away with a man.
Context is a very important thing, but its removal can lead to all sorts of marvelous situations like this. I still enjoy it when someone introduces me, their game leader in Dungeons & Dragons, as their dungeon master in public, to many raised eyebrows. Teaching English to middle schoolers in Korea, I asked, okay, what's another way you can express surprise in English? After going over expressions like, no way, are you serious? Are you kidding me? One kid yells from the very back of the room, what the frick? I did the same thing when I was little and still not fluent in English. My teacher said, what phrases can you make with beat? She was looking for something like beat up or beat at. I was reading a lot of stuff in English on the internet and without thinking much said, beat the crap out of. So proud of such a long phrase I'd achieved. I was sent out of the class. ESL teacher. I had my students do an activity where they had to give directions based off a map and situations I'd chosen. The final question was more complex and one of my students wrote, way too difficult, take a cab. On a 3rd grade Charlotte's Web quiz, give 2 pieces of evidence that support this statement. Charlotte was a good friend to Wilbur. The answer given was, she comforted him and didn't let him become pork. You know what I don't get about that story? Why is the pig the one who becomes famous? The real news is the fricking super genius spider who knows how to think critically and write in English. Who cares what it thinks about the pig? I want to know its thoughts on the origins of reality.
An elementary school kid saw the answer key. He swore he'd come up with answers may vary all on his own.
What's sad is we had to grade a first semester chemistry test once at university that was made for the medical students. I don't remember if the medical students were at first semester too. They took the test together with the first semester chemistry students but had an alternative version anyway. Thing is, the grading sheet with the right answers was leaked beforehand. One student wrote the correct answer down and then wrote 1 point for every correct formula underneath his answer. How do you finish school without walking in front of a car when you're that damn stupid? I asked a 3-year-old what love was for a Valentine's Day card to his parents. His response?
Maybe love is what tornadoes need.
We call him the professor because he teaches us new things every day. In nutrition class at community college, the teacher asks, what's one of the first things you throw out of the window when you drink booze? And this kid just mumbles, standards. A fellow student once answered, in the head, to the question, where was JFK shot? Instead of the intended answer of Dallas. I mean, he was also shot in his car. I've got a story from my fiancé's childhood. They were testing her intelligence or awareness and showed her an image with a TV in the room. The TV was turned on, showing a cartoon, and had a plant on top of it. The question was, what's on the television? The answer was, a plant. Apparently, she kept insisting in utter frustration until the administrator bothered to look at the image and not the answer sheet. Reminds me of a friend's story. I don't know about public schools, but for sure at private schools you get a little quiz-type test with a teacher before they confirm you're ready for kindergarten. One of the things he had to do was identify pictures. He aced the section except for the picture of the airplane. He looked and thought hard and then burst into tears saying, I don't know what that is." Turns out his dad worked for Boeing, and he was trying and failing to discern exactly what model plane the super generic picture was depicting. This is very cute, bless the little guy's heart. Probably trying to count the windows and work out whether it was a 737 or 747, coming up short for both. Why are you late? The bell went off before I got here.
Why are you late? I had trouble with my bike. What was the trouble? I didn't get on it early enough.
College professor teaching developmental psychology. At the end of the semester, I asked all the students to write down the most interesting or important thing they've learned. One wrote, "Babies are stupid and old people still do the deed." It's not wrong, kinda covers the lifespan. My dad used to coach basketball and was trying to get kids into a 2-3 zone. He yelled out to one kid in particular who was in man-to-man, "What defense are we playing?" The kid slaps the floor and says, "Tough defense." I teach forensic science. We were going to be using iodine to fume fingerprints. Iodine vapor is no joke, so I terrify the students and use only 2 volunteers with goggles and respirators at the chemical hood. But we still go over the MSDs, PPE, and equipment. I spend maybe 5 minutes talking about everything and the chemical hood to my class of 30. Towards the end, "So, someone tell me, what is a hood?" A hand shot up. "Yes, student. It's like the place where you grew up." I facepalm, the class laughs, and I'm unable to pivot his answer in the moment. He's on the spectrum and wasn't trying to be funny. This is intentional, but I teach a foreign language, so when I introduce the word for "I don't know," I call on a student who typically gets answers wrong, and ask them to translate the word as if he or she should know it. When the student inevitably responds with, "I don't know," I tell them they're right, and the look on their face is always priceless. In a class that deals with electricity, I asked the students to name a good conductor. They said Leonard Bernstein.
As a music teacher, this brings me great joy.
Asked what is the moral of the story in The Little Engine That Could, I got the answer,
don't pick up hitchhikers.
To refresh your memory, the engine had trouble getting up the hill because he had taken on several more passengers due to their train breaking down. What side of the road do people in France drive on?
Miss, they drive on both sides.
I'm not the teacher, but I witnessed this in class. Sociology professor asks, why do you conform? Student,
it's always been my goal in life to blend in.
Professor, no more questions for you. In German, there's this little drawing game called Das Haus vom Nikolaus, consisting of drawing a house without lifting the pen or drawing the same line twice. Well, the act of drawing something without lifting your pen is called in einem Zug zeichnen, which literally translates to drawing in a train. So yes, one kid actually drew a house in a train. Okay, kids, name something living.
A fox.
Name something non-living.
Fox crap. I wrote an exam where the question was, can you name the 3 models of DNA replication? She wrote, no.
I mean, that was bad question writing on your part. Well, something like, name 3 types of DNA replication would still result in the student writing no. You should recognize that this would be equivalent to leaving the question blank with the original wording. It was a valid answer to your question. It's not a valid response to the above rewording. Makes me remember something I did when I was in grade 2. The student teacher took us into a private room one by one for eye exams. I've never taken an eye exam before, and it wasn't really explained to me what was happening. I was just sat down and asked to read the first line of the chart, then the second, then the third. By the time it came to the 4th line, I was like, it's too small for me to read. 1 minute, please. Then I got up, walked over to the board, and started reading the letters. Apparently, that's not how you do eye exams. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I teach English to Vietnamese kids. I asked, what is the population of Vietnam? The kid quickly surveyed the room and said, more than 15. This guy is going places. I can finally answer one of these. The student is reading a science magazine during a bit of downtime. Student: Whoa, yo, mister, you mean to tell me pollen is like a flower splooge? Sort of.
Man, I be getting that crap in my face all the time.
Well, he's not wrong. Most of us are catching steaming floral loads to the face every day of spring. Some of us love it, and it makes others of us sick. Kind of like transmitted diseases. Fun thought. I asked my class, when is the time you've used integrity? My student answered, I wash my hands after going to the bathroom, even though no one's there. I don't think anyone I work with has any of this kind of integrity. Something my brother answered for homework. My brother was in year 1 and his homework was to draw a balloon blown up. He drew a picture with lots of squiggly shapes spread out across the paper. He took it as the balloon blown up, like a bomb, so he drew the leftovers of an exploded balloon. His teacher loved it and gave him full marks. Not a teacher, but a witness. In high school history class, the teacher asked, what was the peace treaty that ended World War II? This was a trick question because there wasn't a single treaty that ended the war, and this one kid blurted out, the Manhattan Project. The teacher laughed so hard that he went and got the other history teacher and had the kid tell him the answer too. Teaching grade 5. Students were fooling around during group work, so I said sarcastically, do I need to stand here and watch you do your work? To which the student responded even more sarcastically, well, you don't have to stand, you can grab the chair and sit. I can't remember which grade it was, but probably the 2nd or 3rd grade. Teacher was asking something relatively simple and no one wanted to or knew the answer. What's going on here? There should be hands up like trees in the forest.
Maybe this is a logging area,
said the joker of our class. I had this pretty attractive history teacher. She was talking about jewels or something at a museum and I blurted out,
Mrs. Smith, I can show you some real nice jewels.
And everyone bust out laughing and the teacher got very red and flustered and embarrassed, and I looked confused because I meant I would show her big diamonds and rubies to jokingly woo her, but the class and the teacher took it as I was referencing my nether regions. I was teaching kindergarteners about needs versus wants, and I showed pictures of things and we talked about why it was or wasn't. After a picture of a puppy came up, everyone but one kid said want, so I asked him to explain his answer. He just says, but what if you're blind? Good answer, you win, kid. I once drew a woolly mammoth picture because I couldn't remember the name of it for a quiz question in science class. I got the point for it. I worked in a special needs class for a year and there was one kid with a textbook case of Asperger syndrome. Very bright, very tough nut to crack. I tried to tell him a corny joke once and he was not having it. Why did the chicken cross the road?
He likely had business over there or was compelled by force.
Well, okay. Easily my favorite memory of that class. My friend's also on the spectrum. It's led to similar punchlines to classic corny jokes. Why don't people play poker in the jungle?
Because the undiscovered tribes who inhabit the jungle have had no contact with Western culture. Therefore, they would never have heard of any game called poker, let alone know how to play it.
Trying to delicately explain to a 3-year-old why she should be kind to her mum. You shouldn't say those things to mummy when she's sick. Who looks after you when you're sick and makes you feel better?
The doctor.
Well, frick. I gave a group of 2nd graders a worksheet about main idea and detail. In the instructions, they were told to circle the main idea and underline the details. One child returned the paper to me very promptly, having underlined the phrase, the main idea, and having circled the details in the instructions. She knew exactly what she was doing when she turned it in. She was a clever one. She did just fine when I asked her to complete the assignment as expected. I said, the quiz tomorrow will be on, and my student shouted, paper! Everyone laughed and I rephrased the question. One of my kids couldn't remember what country wasn't a part of the UK on a test, so she put Mexico. I teach English in Japan. When teaching my students, I asked, what do we say when someone is being too loud? And one smartass yells, shut up forever! I've never said this, no clue where he learned it either. I nearly lost my crap, but he wasn't wrong. The correct answer is, be quiet please, which I told him was more polite. He just grinned as if he knew, but didn't care. Smart kid, I'll miss him when I change jobs.
I get this pretty often from my students. My favorite is when I say, please be quiet to new students and they ask their friends what I said. Usually someone will come back with, shut up. I teach and coach baseball. After our short stop got thrown out on the 2nd for the 3rd out,
I told someone to pick up Will, in baseball terms meaning get his glove and hat so he can go out to the field. This kid who was new to baseball, a big lineman type of football player, claps his hands and goes to the shortstop. "It's okay, Will, you'll get him next time." I cried laughing. Poor William. Well, at least he didn't get hauled over the lineman's shoulder and carried off the pitch. I'm a teacher, but my best answer to this is in high school. An English teacher was asking about the poetic reasoning behind why the moon is always used in a feminine context. Guy behind me says, "Because they're both on a 28-day cycle?" When I used to teach anatomy, "Anthony, name this bone." Femur. "Is it a left femur or a right femur?" "Yeah." My godfather is a lobster fisherman, and all of the kids in the family would go out on the boat with him from time to time. There was a running joke with my uncle, dad, and godfather. They would get a kid to bait a trap, then applaud them for being a master baiter. My cousin went back to school after summer vacation, and when the teacher asked what she did that summer, she proudly stated, "I became a..." Well, you get the picture. Not a teacher, but just a witness to this hilarity. In science class in high school, our teacher was talking about electricity and lightning and the effects of being shocked. He asked if anyone happens to know what is the first sense you lose when struck by lightning. Without missing a beat, a girl put her hand up and answered, in all honesty, "Your sense of humor?" The class had to stop for a few minutes until everyone could regain their composure. This one kid twice on the same quiz. First question, describe the bus ride at the beginning of the chapter. "It was a bus ride filled with action, but also with emotion." Second question, what happens at the end of the story? "The story ends." That kid is going to be a politician someday. My wife is an elementary school teacher. The kids were practicing their 2 times tables, and the question said something along the lines of, "John lives in his house with his mum, dad, brother, and grandpa. How many total hands do the people in John's house have altogether?" The answer they were looking for was 10, and they wanted the students to show that 2 times 5 equals 10. This young man instead wrote, "Not enough information. What if someone lost a hand?" He wasn't wrong. My wife just wrote "good thinking" on his assignment and gave him full credit. The kid was bright and knew his times tables, so that wasn't an issue. She also had his older brother as a student and said they were both smart, but jokesters. My wife now teaches kindergarten, this was when she taught 3rd grade, and said she misses the funny responses on tests. She used to have a full Word document of the funniest answers. There was a buddy of mine in college, Jay, who was legendary for his witty responses in class. We were training to be RAs, and the residential life person asked, "What are some things that, as an RA, you shouldn't do in your dorm room?" People were saying stuff like drinking, etc. Jay raises his hand and says, "Practicing medicine without a license." The trainer was like, yeah, that's true." The same guy was in a film class. The teacher asks, "What technique to find the scene we just watched?" Jay raised his hand, gets called on and says, "Long, awkward silences." "Teacher, could you give an example?" Jay then proceeded to look awkwardly at the teacher, opening his mouth to say something periodically for 20 seconds. I co-teach a class and do a lot of the grading. Kids will write, "I love teacher A," and I'm like, "Ha, this is teacher B, nice try, losers." Not especially funny, but I've thought about it for a long time afterwards. I was substituting for an elementary ESL class. There was one young boy from Africa. We asked the kids in the class what 3 wishes they would like if they could have anything. This young man said, 1. New shoes for my mother. 2. School all year. 3. Roast chicken for dinner. Most of the other wishes had to do with toys or candy. This kid was focused. We had a quiz about the 1960s in what I think was either my sophomore or junior year. One of the questions was, John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy were the first brothers to do, and we had to fill in the blank. We were doing a peer edit of the quiz the next day with another class's quiz. When my teacher got to the JFK and RFK question, someone raised their hand and said, "My guy wrote down JFK and RFK were the first 2 brothers to do Marilyn Monroe." Mr. Q's reply was, "Technically that is kind of correct, but dock a point off anyway because the real answer is run for president." In conclusion, the Kennedy brothers' claim to fame isn't running for office, it was doing Marilyn Monroe. I was in a special ed room where the children were sorting nouns. The picture of the mailman went in the people column, the baseball went in the things column, and so on. There were several pictures of animals, and a little girl, who wore shorts with puppies and horses on them almost daily, sorted the animals in the people column, and was the only one in class to have done so. I pulled her aside to ask why she didn't sort the animals in the things column. I didn't tell her she was wrong, I just wanted to see her train of thought. And she started giggling and burst out laughing, saying, "How is an animal like a thing? Animals are alive. Cows can't be like a desk." And she's cracking up because she thinks it's so silly that people view animals as things. I asked her if someone taught her that or if she just knew it, and she said it was just something she knows. It was touching and innocent and very sweet. I love animal lovers. What celebrity behaved like a complete jerk to you in public? Wayne Brady screamed at my sister for taking his picture in Vegas. She wasn't taking his picture, he just walked into the shot. He freaked out, screaming that he wanted her to show him that she was deleting it. She was trying to explain that she didn't even know he was there, and showed him the picture that only had a sliver of him in it when she looked through the shots. He continued to berate her about not respecting his privacy in the middle of the Vegas Strip. She was in tears, apologizing for doing nothing wrong, and he never acknowledged he was in the wrong and continued to badmouth her as he stormed away. Can't watch him anymore. Mark Wahlberg did an appearance at his brother's restaurant. He refused to take pictures with anyone taller than him. Now, this I can believe. Met Tiger Woods when I was 15. He slapped my hat out of my hand. A different golfer whom I didn't know ran up, picked up my hat, and asked if his signature would be okay. I agreed, but I don't know who he was or what his name was, but my grandpa was pleased upon seeing it. Pauly Shore. It was mid-90s in New York City, and my wife and I were at a very popular Asian restaurant with a huge wait time. He walks in with an entourage and tries to worm his way ahead of everyone else. He tried to play the "don't you know who I am" card. Hostess was having none of it, said, "Don't know, don't care, you'll wait." They left in a huff. I know this won't come as a surprise, but Steven Seagal used to frequent a restaurant I worked at. Guy was a colossal piece of crap. He treated his wonderful family like crap, and it was obvious he was cheating on his wonderful wife with the Asian nanny. This fricking moron would come into a 10-table restaurant, all 6'5" and 300 pounds of him, wearing a golden kimono in the South, and would wonder why people were looking at him. So he made us take the entry partition down and put it around his table. He was an absolute trash human being. Also met Peyton Manning one night after the Super Bowl he lost to the Saints. This was at an ultra-high-end golf course, and we were not allowed to act like we recognized celebrities, which was more awkward than anything. Anyway, he walked up and ordered a beer and introduced himself, but I was already turning to get the beer as he stuck out his hand to shake my hand and tell me who he was. As if I didn't know who Peyton Manning was in the grounds when I saw his forehead pull into the parking lot. So I blew off Peyton Manning for a handshake. How many of you losers can say that? Great freaking guy, though. Well, the narrator thought that maybe the author was drawing too many conclusions about Steven Seagal, but after a quick Google I can see that he is, if anything, painting him as less of a D-bag than the man himself often behaved as in public. Didn't happen to me, but I had a physics teacher in high school who sat next to Bill Nye on a plane once. Apparently, he was super unpleasant to be around. Every time this thread comes up, James Corden ends up taking it over. "Hey James, you won't remember me, but me and my friends sat at a table next to you and Harry Styles and some others in Manchurian Legends in London's Chinatown about 6 years ago. We didn't bother you, but you were a massively entitled C-word who yelled and treated the waitstaff like crap. And when one of my party politely suggested you calm down, you got really aggressive and threatening, in a chubby way like a boozy panda. So my question is this: why did Harry seem so cool while you were such a massive, throbbing eggplant?" This is from his AMA thread, by the way, literally hundreds of posts like this from ex-fans, staff, and other actors. I haven't met a rude celebrity yet, but Stanley's security at Calgary Comic Con a few years back was fricking brutal. The guy acted like he was a fricking mercenary. Stanley would sit in a chair and you'd come close to him to get your photo op, and Stan let me be pretty well arm-to-arm close, and his security guard yelled at me and asked Stan if he authorized me to be that close. Even the photographer looked at the security guy like he was crazy. But at the same Comic-Con, meeting Norman Reedus, Stephen Yeun, and Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger, was amazing. They're all super awesome and tried to have a legitimate conversation with you. Steve Yeun even complimented my glasses. 10 out of 10, best con for me. I was the butthole in my store. I saw Don Cheadle at an airport and was thinking about Ocean's 11 and said to my friend, "Dude, it's Bernie Mac." And he looked back and said, "Nah, I'm the other black guy from Ocean's 11, but at least you liked the movie." Jared Leto hit on my girlfriend at the time and called me fat. His brother Shannon was super nice though. At least he didn't tattoo fat on your forehead. He was a total rude, aloof jerk, and his brother was super lovely, warm, and sweet. Jimmy Fallon. I liked his show, and one day while I was getting a tour at NBC Studios, he bumped into me and turned around and said sorry, and then flipped me off, and it's not like I got in his way. He walked into me from behind. David Cross is pretty miserable. He's from Atlanta, and his sister runs a food truck in town. Her recipes were all named after David Cross or Arrested Development type stuff, so my wife and I, being fans of David, asked about it, and she told us she was his sister. So for months, we'd chat her up anytime we ordered food from her truck, and eventually David was in town. She invites us to come to the food truck to meet him, so we bring a poster from the early 2000s and are super pumped to meet him. We get there and she's very anxious and hesitant to introduce us. Weird, but okay. No, it's okay, I'll introduce you. She does, and he was incredibly dismissive and unpleasant. Never heard of anyone having a good interaction with him. Our best interaction was with Conan O'Brien. He was a total class act. Chatted him up in a bathroom line of all places and said my wife and I were huge fans. He said we should come on by the table to chat. I told him we didn't want to interrupt his dinner, but he insisted, then asked if he wanted pictures, and was super cool. I'll say on behalf of Cross that I listened to him on Andy Richter's 3 Questions, and he says he feels bad about being a jerk to his fans when he was younger. He admits actively being a jerk, but he also said he didn't really know how to talk to people at all. He said he'd get weird when people complimented him or said they liked something. I thought it was kind of good of him to admit he'd been a jerk in the past, instead of continuing to be a jerk and just thinking his fans are buttholes. Kurt Vonnegut. I had to get in touch with him frequently for work at a non-profit for several years. He was never once even vaguely polite. I tried to bum a cigarette off Kurt Vonnegut once, when he was guest professor at my old college. Before I could even say a word, he looked up and fricking growled at me. So naturally, I panicked and fled. At the end of the year, the school paper did an interview with him, and he was like, "For some reason, hardly anyone came to my office hours." Yeah, Kurt, it's because you growl at people. Bobby Flay. We paid hundreds of dollars to go to a fancy event he was participating in. Waited for a long time just to meet him and say hi, and he looked at us and walked away. He was a real jerk about it, too. Bill Nye the Science Guy. I was on a field trip in middle school and our teacher saw him. She politely asked if he could say something to us or just say hi. We always watched him in science class. He told her to F off and basically berated her for bothering him and asking him to speak to a bunch of kids. I'm not sure if he was just having a bad day, but it was not the best experience as a child. Some narrator's insights halfway through the script. Bill Nye's name came up a lot in this story grouping, which may be upsetting to some people, but there it is. Apparently, just don't talk to him if you see him in public. I won't do any more of his stories unless they're particularly juicy. Me and my sister saw Alec Baldwin, Tina Fey, and Salma Hayek on the street when we were eating lunch. They were just coming out of a car, about to go into some building next to us. We had no idea why they were together, but in retrospect, it was definitely because they were filming 30 Rock together. My sister said, "Oh my god, is that Tina Fey?" And Alec Baldwin turned around and went right in her face and said, "Don't freaking say that. Don't speak to us. Why would you say something like that? You can't speak to us, not now." But it didn't really end there. He yelled again at us outside the building, saying, "Don't look over here. Turn around and eat your food. F off." He sounded genuinely furious at us, almost like he wanted us to yell back and start something with him. Honestly, my sister was on the verge of tears. It was horribly embarrassing. Everyone knows now that Alec Baldwin has a history of screaming at people, but at the time we had no idea. Don't get me wrong, my sister shouldn't have yelled at Tina Fey like that, but the way Alec snapped was straight up scary, like he was about to physically attack her. Salma Hayek and some other lady who I didn't recognize came over and apologized to us. She asked if we wanted her to go and get Tina and get her autograph because apparently Tina felt bad, but we said no. She then talked to us about the food we were eating, which was Mexican food, and we ended up having a brief conversation about New York's lack of quality Mexican food. She was incredibly charismatic and sweet. My dad has been a radio personality for over 30 years and worked in country music for over half of that time. He gets to meet celebrities semi-regularly. Apparently Keith Urban was really nice, Carrie Underwood was kind of mediocre because he caught her right after her performance and she was tired, But Kenny Chesney puts the D in D-bag. Direct quote from my dad. Kenny promised to sign some pictures, t-shirts, etc. for a couple of kids who won a game through the radio. Kenny instead took a bunch of groupies into one of the back rooms of the studio with a bottle of whiskey and locked the door. When my dad tried to get him to open the door and fulfill his end of the deal, he called the cops on my dad, and he was lucky enough to get a cop who was a good acquaintance. Cop said there wasn't much he could do other than make Kenny leave. So that's what he did. Kids never got their stuff signed, so my dad gave them some coupons for free pizza. He said that after a few years, other radio hosts told him they had similar encounters with Kenny. I've had the perfect combination of bad star, good star. It was at DragonCon, maybe 2005. I'm going through the big autograph room waiting to get David Carradine's autograph. He looked so mad. He didn't say a word as I told him how much I enjoyed his work. Okay, I get it. Maybe he was having a bad day. Next to Mr. Carradine was Mark Singer, star of Beastmaster, V, among other things. Mr. Singer is smiling, talking to people as they go by. He looks genuinely happy to be there. Suddenly, a woman behind me stumbled and dropped a huge stack of materials she wanted autographed. Mr. Carradine looked down on her like she was a bug. Mark Singer jumped over his table and started helping the woman pick up her things. Didn't hesitate one moment, just started helping. That's when I decided if I ever became famous, I was going to try and be like Mark Singer, not David Carradine. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I sat next to Rosario Dawson on a flight from LA to Austin while she was shooting Death Proof. I didn't recognize her, and she kept trying to strike up conversations while I was studying for a Cal 2 final. I was a butthole to her until it came out that she was Rosario Dawson. Then we had a very pleasant conversation. I regret meeting her because I am the jerk. Prince Andrew. Spent a lot of time around him 10 years ago, working at private school events he attended. The guy was a total prick.
Maybe he would have been nicer to you if you were younger.
I met Shane Dawson at a restaurant I used to work at. He used to come in a few times a year with his fiancée and in-laws. He's a prick. None of my servers liked him or wanted to serve his family, and I damn near had to fight some little girls off the property because they wouldn't leave without seeing him. I sat near him at Denny's in Santa Monica around midnight once. Must have been back when he had longer hair, and I don't think he was dating Ryland yet, but I'd already stopped watching years prior. He was alone with his laptop, didn't even realize until my boyfriend pointed him out. So I looked behind and indeed it was Shanae. Can't remember a single time he thanked our server, although while we were there she was just refilling his coffee. Apparently some people don't feel the need to thank their servers every single time they visit their table. Afterwards I realized he'd been live tweeting about the other couple a few booths down from us who were seated closer to him. We narrowly avoided him talking crap about us to thousands of people. My gosh. Met Dennis Leary. Butthole. Figures. Mike Rowe was super cool though. Reggie Jackson. He was a childhood idol of mine. I got the opportunity to get a photo with him at some booth at a trade show called Internet World. Years ago during the .com boom. No one was in line to get pictures with him, so I walked up to get a photo while he was apparently trying to get the girls in the next booth over to sleep with him. He acted all bugged that I asked for a photo, even though that's what he was hired for, and rolled his eyes. I guess he thought I was crimping his style just by showing up in line to get a picture. I tossed the picture in the trash once I got it. Later that day, I got a ball signed by Steve Garvey, who was super nice. He replaced Reggie Jackson as my hero that night. Ace Frehley of Kiss. It was at a rock and roll, TV, movie memorabilia convention in the mid-90s, shortly before the Kiss reunion, and he clearly didn't want to be there. He didn't talk to fans, didn't say hi, heck, he didn't even look at you when you came to his table. He just signed whatever you placed in front of him, and you were hustled away afterwards. On the other hand, Adam Batman West was at the next signing table, and he was totally cool guy. Shook hands, chatted with everyone, signed whatever we wanted, posed for pictures, etc. Meeting him more than made up for Ace's surly, hungover D-bag act. A famous soap opera star in my country, he came into the Dairy Queen I was working at. I didn't know who he was, and my co-worker started hyperventilating and went into the back. The guy was rude, and when I handed him his cone, he said, "Is that all?" Like he expected extra because he was famous. Yeah, dude, if you order one scoop, you get one scoop. Didn't find out he was famous until he left and my coworker came back to the front. "Sir, this is a Dairy Queen, not a drama queen." I've forgiven this particular author for not giving us a name purely on the basis of that clapback added by the subsequent comment. Thank you, oh sassy one. Diana Ross. I worked in a health club in a hotel across the street from a stadium when I was young. She came in, looked at the pool, which was a really decent lap pool, and said, "My bathtub is bigger than this." I replied, "Go back to your bathtub then." She wanted me fired instantly. HR told me to go home for 2 days because if they fired everyone she wanted fired, the hotel wouldn't have any staff. I met James Brown back in the 80s when I lived in Vale. The man was dissatisfied with everything and generally drunk. Absolute flip side was meeting Mr. Rogers when I was at Pitt. That man was the real deal. I wouldn't say disappointing as I was never eager to meet him, but Drake. Drake was just unprofessional and egotistical when I worked with him both times. This was before he got big, first award show type level. He's told me to F off directly and I watched his mum calm him down from a tantrum. My fiancé is a chef at a pretty prominent boutique hotel restaurant in Philly. He says the 2 worst guests were Ariana Grande, made not 1 but 2 servers cry, and the Rolling Stones. The best guests were Sylvester Stallone, Pink, Lady Gaga, and Guy Fieri. Anyone from Pittsburgh can tell you that Ben Roethlisberger is a horrible person. I have a friend who owns a bar on the south side and he has, on multiple occasions, just walked into the bar and said, "My friends and I are drinking for free tonight." He also told Arnold Palmer's grandson that he doesn't sign autographs if he's not getting paid to do so. Legend has it that he earned a pretty nasty verbal beatdown from Palmer, and apparently he's banned from his golf course. Arnold Palmer, on the other hand, was an incredibly nice guy. Bill Cosby, even before all his real horrible stuff got publicly known. He came to a restaurant in DC where I was a hostess. I came to get him for his table and he said, "Do you not need a college degree for this job?" No, man, have you never met a server before? I was sitting, undressed, in a Korean day spa steam room when a guy who looked just like Lawrence Fishburne walked in and sat down across from me. I was there with 2 friends and we were talking and you could tell we were all like, could that really be Morpheus? We just kept talking and he was listening to whatever story we were reminiscing about and then he smiled at something we said and we saw the tooth gap. We all played it cool though and didn't say anything until after he left. 10 out of 10, a nice guy to hang out undressed with. The lead singer of Smash Mouth showed me a picture of him sticking a beer bottle into a Brazilian woman. Ruined Astro Lounge for me. I met Wayne Gretzky once. Guy's a bit of a chode to be honest. I caught him on a bad day. We all get like that. His father, rest in peace, was so much cooler than he was. On the flip side, my brother met Gord Downey, also rest in peace, at a get-together. He was with his girlfriend and her family at one of her parents' friends' place. They were all sitting, chatting, having a good time. Out of nowhere, Gord walks in like it's nothing. Apparently the owners of the house were friends with Gord. My brother, being a huge Tragically Hip fan, was internally freaking out, but he kept cool on the outside so as to not bother this guy. He talked with him for a while about sports and things like that. Towards the end of the night when my brother was getting ready to leave, Gord stopped him and shook his hand while saying, "Thank you for pretending not to know who I am." Deion Sanders. I interviewed him at an NFL military event like 8 or 9 years ago, and he was a prick the whole time. He threw my lav mic on the ground when he was done instead of placing it in my outstretched hand. I was also active duty military at the time and the event was on a ship. Hey Sanders, if you hear this, F you, dude. F you. Yeah, but he was also capable of being a jerk and throwing mics to the ground at MLB events. You gotta respect that kind of versatility. This guy expected my seat on a plane. He was our local news anchor. Actually said, "I may look familiar." I said, "You're a merchant banker?" Justin Timberlake. This was when I was working a drive-thru at Burger King around 2002 to 2003 or so. He came up at the drive-thru with someone else driving, but he was sticking his head out like, "Hey, hey, hey!" at us. I didn't really recognize him, but he asked if we knew who he was. I said no, but my coworker said yes. Then he looked at me like, "You don't know?" and was just really confused. My coworker said it was Justin Timberlake and he said, "Yeah, hello, come on man." Then he just sort of had small talk. He asked us how work was, how our day was. But here's the thing. The entire time he's leaning all the way over the driver who was clearly horribly uncomfortable and a bit crushed by him leaning over on him. He asked if I was from the Middle East and I said no. He clearly didn't listen and said, "Yeah, that sucks. Sorry about the whole Afghanistan thing." He asked if we wanted his autograph. We said sure. He wrote it down and gave it to us. He then said bye and left. It was all in all a really funny experience, and I try not to let it influence my view of him because he was clearly on something, but he just came off like a big goofy attention-loving silly Billy the entire time. Met Morgan Freeman at a Bed Bath & Beyond. He was shopping for a teapot on a lower shelf and stood up right when I almost walked into him, and I was like, "Wow, you look just like Morgan Freeman." And he said without skipping a beat, "If I was Morgan Freeman, wouldn't I be in Hollywood or something?" And the voice made me now like 99.9% certain it was him. And I was like, "I guess you would. Enjoy your time here." I don't regret meeting him, and I don't think he was being a jerk. I just thought it was so Morgan Freeman of him to have a line like that to make you wonder if you met Morgan Freeman or just a guy that likes to act like a character in a bunch of his movies. What's the dumbest thing a criminal has done or said to a cop? I read a theft suspect her Miranda rights, to which she stated in a recorded interview, "I'm invoking my right to silence and a lawyer because I stole a lot of crap and I don't want to incriminate myself." I stopped someone who was in the area of a load of theft from motor vehicles. After a bit of questioning, I carried out a search and found numerous wallets, phones, and other things. He claimed that all of the cards were his, all 13 different identities. To be fair, he stuck to his story. He carried it all the way to court, going not guilty. "Okay then, Mr. Jones, you're under arrest for 12 counts of theft. Mr. Fletcher, you're also under arrest for 12 counts of theft. Mrs. Rodriguez, you are under arrest for 12 counts of theft." Stopped a lady for speeding 15 miles per hour over the speed limit. I asked what her reason could be for going so fast. She said, "I live here. You can't give me a speeding ticket. I live just down the street. I live here. This is unbelievable. I live here." So my personal favourite was when a bloke on a motorbike swerved in front of our squad car and crashed. We hopped out, picked the bike up off him, it was pinning his leg, and asked, "You alright, mate?" To which he replied, "Of course I'm alright. What do you mean?" "Well, you just fell off your bike, mate." "No, I didn't." He just kept insisting that there was no way he could have crashed, and it must have been someone else. I called the cops on my roommate in college because she tried to attack me and she wouldn't cooperate with the cops, so she got cuffed and was screaming about how she was going to beat me good. They were like, "Yeah? You're going to beat her good?" And she was agreeing. In court later, the judge asked her, "So you think it's okay to beat someone good if they turn your TV off when you're not there?" And she nodded and said, "Yes, I do." And the judge just deep sighed. She got a big fat fine because they couldn't prove assault. She got charged with something lesser that had a max fine of about $1,500. Funny thing was, she had a pay or appear date for like 3 days before the one she was assigned at our trial, so they agreed to just merge the 2 dates so she wouldn't have to appear twice. So that means she already went to court for something else and got fined for something else too. Folks, in case you were wondering, if you blurt something like this out by accident one time, it might be in your best interest to revise your statement further down the line. People say honesty is the best policy. You can always be honest about seeing a better way forward. Friend who is an officer told me this one a little while ago. He was driving near where a known car thief lived, so he stops by. SUV in the driveway with no tags. My friend walks up, runs the VIN, stolen. Now the property had a house on it, and then out back a small mother-in-law suite where said thief lived. Officer walks out back, knocks, and then hears a car door. Officer starts running, engine starts, and yeah, the thief is driving away in the stolen SUV. Officer knows where he ditches stolen cars at, so has an officer stake out that area. Sure enough, 2 hours later, the SUV rolls up with a Jeep following it. SUV driver wipes down the dash, wipes down the outside door handle, and gets in the Jeep. Officer pulls them over and arrests them both. Why both? The Jeep is stolen too. Officer runs her license, sends another officer to her address, and guess what? She had a stolen car at her place too. 3 stolen cars recovered, 2 people in jail, all because one officer decided to stop by a thief's last address. Not my story, but my police officer friend's. He had gone in to arrest someone for dealing substances. He was in full uniform while someone else had already been there undercover. The substance dealer looks at the undercover cop and says, "You're undercover." "Yes, well done." He looks at my uniformed friend and says, "You're undercover too." He was not. Then he looks at someone else, not a police officer at all, and says, "And you." The guy responds with, "How am I an undercover police officer? I just bought substances off of you." And that's how they made an unexpected arrest at that raid. Not a police officer, but my father was a 911 dispatch operator. My father was working one night and he gets a call from a man who was obviously drunk. 911, what's your emergency? Yeah, I think I just heard a red car crash. You heard a red car crash? Yeah. Okay, police are on their way. Click. My dad finds out later that this guy was driving drunk and crashed his car not far from his house. The guy decides to get out of his car, stumble home, and dial 911 to report the fact that he'd had a car crash. In his drunken mind, he figured he'd report the crash as someone who heard it and he'd get off somehow. But he had to specify the color because apparently a red car crashing sounds different than a blue car crashing. Student paramedic here once went to a family with a 2-year-old with difficulty breathing. Walked into the house to find 4 people and the parents smoking green herb with the baby in the room. The baby was crying, coughing, and spluttering. Couldn't believe my eyes. My mentor swiftly rang for police backup and we filled out some safeguarding paperwork concerns. Pretty sure they arrested them on scene for neglect. Dad's a detective. Had a murder case where a dog walker found a severed head in a park. Over the rest of the morning, they found a full set of chopped up body parts around that park. A trail of blood led from each part and they followed them all the way back to a nearby house. In through the door and up the stairs to a room covered in blood with a guy asleep in a bed. Turns out this guy had got drunk with a friend, had an argument, killed him, chopped him up and hid his body parts in the park before passing out back at the house. Police caught him literally red-handed. Apparently he was really confused how they got him so quickly. I was police at the time. In the middle of the night, my partner and I found a car in a cemetery. Stolen cars were dumped there regularly. The car had its windows down and it had only recently been left there. It was still warm to touch. It didn't flag up as stolen, and through the window I could see a crystal pipe in plain view. That gives us the ability to search the car. Inside we find a bunch of crystal pipes, 3.5 grams of crystal, a small amount of green herb, and a gat. There was also a tablet phone that was unlocked, and while we were searching the car, the tablet kept on receiving messages from people trying to score crystal. I had a quick look through the phone and was able to figure out that the owner of the car had come out from the city. I worked rurally at the time. They'd come out to make a score from one of the local gangs. But the gang didn't want her turning up, so arranged to meet her at the cemetery and conduct business somewhere else. I leave a business card under the wipers, not my card but the station's, and on the back I wrote that she, the owner of the car, should come down to the station if she wants to get her stuff back. And sure enough she did, at 9 in the morning, high as all heck, looking for her crystal and gat. All the people from To Catch a Predator. NBC has online transcripts and they still come up with the stupidest excuses. The narrator can't really repeat any of those transcripts here, but I encourage you to read them if you want a rather morbid laugh about how people who have explicitly tried to proposition minors try to pass it off as something else. If they were telling the truth, it would be an almost Tobias Funke level of unfortunate phrasing. Suspect was caught for substance possession on the streets, and we were talking to the prosecutor to get a warrant for his house. Somehow he managed to call his wife without our notice, and as we realized what had happened, we heard him saying, "Honey, go take the fish out of the fridge." After we got the warrant and searched his house, there was his fridge full of speed and the plates with fish which his wife had prepared for his return thrown in the trash. Retired cop here. Boy, do I have stories. One idiot move a guy made was to steal some poor girl's car. It was her first car, she worked full-time, was a sweet little thing, and we felt so bad. She was crushed. Also in the car for some reason was her cell phone. So a colleague who has the gift of talking crap really well calls the number. A guy answers. It goes a little something like this. "Motherfricker, you stole my girlfriend's car." The answer went, "Which I will frick you up and then frick your girlfriend." "Bring it, motherfricker. No cops, no friends. Me and you. I'm at the Chevron on Main Street and 5th. I'm calling your witch butt out." "Which I'm on my way." The phone clicks. Me? "No fricking way, he's coming!" The guy rounded the corner and pulls into the gas station. We hid our cars behind it, and then when he parked, we boxed him in. He had a Glock too. Fricking idiot. He was on probation and had a loaded piece. Yes, he showed up in the stolen car with a fricking shaved key in the ignition he used to steal it. Because people liked it so much, I talked to the original cop who has the gift of talking crap. He said a few months later at court, the guy claimed the gat was not his. As we found it under the driver's seat, he said it must be hers. So messed up. But the jury didn't buy it. We saw him shoving something from his waist under the seat when he saw us. Also, yeah, the look on his face was classic. It went from, I'm gonna kill this dude, to the look a prey animal gets when it knows it's done. He was killed a few years later in a chase in another stolen car. He was ejected from that one. Motor vehicle stop. License and registration, please. Proceeds to lean over the passenger seat, scoops up a handful of lo mein and tries to put it in the officer's hand. He was locked up for DUI, fourth offense. To this day, I still wonder if he thought he was passing his correct paperwork or if the Chinese food was some sort of peace offering. Was witness to a crime and had to give evidence in court. Basically, witnessed a girl crashing her car and barrel rolling it into a tree. She was clearly drunk. The fireman arrived after 10 minutes, her car had leaked petrol everywhere, and then her husband shows up on foot and tries to calm her down, followed by her mother in a car and the police. She tried to claim that she wasn't the one driving, even though no one else had been in the car. In court a year later, she said her mother had been driving, the one who showed up in her own car 10 minutes after the crash. She also punched an officer in the face and was pepper sprayed, but that's a whole other story. Needless to say, she was found guilty. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Dispatcher. Had a guy call in and tell us that he's currently violating the protective order by being with his ex who is pregnant by him. Wants us to call the judge and get it dismissed so they can go inside the restaurant and eat. Officer is standing next to my partner who answers the call and asks the guy where he is so he can send the judge to him. The guy hangs up. Responded to an apartment complex for a kid eating a corn dog and was stuck on the roof. The FD arrives and gets the kid off the roof. Asked the kid why he was eating a corn dog on the roof. His answer was, because I threw it up there. His look of duh left me speechless. DUI trial. Defendant chooses to represent herself. She tries to introduce evidence during the trial, but is quickly blocked by the prosecution. The judge, maybe taking pity on the flaming train wreck that was this woman's defense, asks to see the evidence. It was a receipt from the bar she left before I stopped her that showed she purchased 2 large margaritas. Her whole defense was, I couldn't have been drunk after only 2 margaritas. She was found guilty. My initial reason for stopping her was that she drove down an embankment on the side of the road to get to a McDonald's drive-thru. My friend is sober driving and there's not enough seats, so 2 people offer to go in the boot. On the way, she gets pulled over and the officer comes up to the window and asks if she knows why he pulled her over. She says, because of the 2 people in my boot? The cop says, no, because you failed to indicate at the last intersection, but tell me more about the people in your boot. These are my pants, but those are not my pockets. Can't make this crap up. I maintain that there's a small chance that there was a tiny portal in front of each pocket redirecting to a less innocent man's accoutrements, but nobody listens to me. One of my favorite Cops episodes was a guy they stopped, pulled some substances out of his pants, and his response was, those aren't my pants. The cop then said, oh, and whose pants are they and why are you wearing them then? The guy said, I don't know. My ex said to the cop who pulled him and his friends over, I'm so frickin' high right now. I had a friend back in the day that earned the name DUI Don because he was driving a girl home after partying one night. She was off her rocker and he was only high. Got pulled over, could easily say that he's sober, was happy to blow into the tube and get out of it. The first thing he says to the cop is, I'm gonna level with you, I'm really high. He spent that night in jail. And the cherry on this, and the reason I know the full details of it all, is because the girl with him was 17 and bonus, homeless. When she didn't have anywhere else to go, she gave them my address, an 18-year-old living alone, and I got to become her temporary legal guardian. Awesome night. Thanks, DUI Don. Sir, can I see your driver's license? I don't have one. Then why were you driving? I wasn't. I was traveling. I was the victim of burglary, but heard this from the police officer. I saw the guy breaking into my place on security camera and called them. They managed to arrest the guy while he was still inside packing up my stuff. He was pretty cocky to the police, as he thought that as he hadn't actually left with his bag of swag, that he hadn't committed a crime yet. All he did was break a window. My grandpa was a cop. He told me a story about how when he was still in uniform filling up his squad car, someone tried to rob him with a knife. Needless to say, that didn't work out for him. Apparently it went something like this. Give me your wallet. What? Give me your wallet. Are you sure you want to do that? Yeah, now hand it over. Grandpa pulls out gun. Okay, you're under arrest. The robber displayed a shocked Pikachu face. My brother is a Detroit cop. Told me this one. They got a call from someone reporting their car was stolen. They show up and it turns out someone had already stolen the tires off the car and then a different group stole the actual car. They pushed it 2 blocks without tires and left perfect grooves in the street all the way to their garage. Their defense was, but we didn't steal the tires. Detroit. When we rob you, we really rob you. I'm a corrections officer. 2 inmates got into a fight in a hallway. I was the closest to them and only saw the start of the fight out of the corner of my eye. In my report, I wrote that I saw the 2 inmates fall to the ground with one on top of the other. Later, the hearing sergeant was reading the report to one of the inmates so they could dispute any facts in the report they felt were untrue or biased. He asked the inmate if they wanted to dispute any facts in my report. The inmate said, "Yeah, we didn't fall to the ground. I grabbed the other inmate and slammed his butt on the floor." What would have been a simple fighting charge turned into an assault charge. Woman is waiting for her DUI trial in the courtroom. The lawyers and judge are milling around and getting their paperwork in order. The trial starts in 10 to 15 minutes. The prosecuting attorney asks her if she wants to take the plea deal one last time. She refuses and goes on about how this is unconstitutional and the police and courts are corrupt and how she's going to take her kid to school, blah blah blah. She's starting to cause a bit of a scene, yelling, acting like a child, just being generally annoying. Someone in the room gets a whiff of alcohol. She's out on bond, so she can basically be given a PBT at any time for any reason. The judge orders one on her. She registers a .226 in court. This woman who is on trial for DUI had the audacity to drive to court drunk and then moan and groan about how she isn't being treated fairly and we're all corrupt, and this is unconstitutional. Not only that, but it explicitly states in your bond conditions that you cannot consume alcohol. So, I cut her off and bring her to the jail. She's still running her mouth during the walkover. I had nothing to say. I had absolutely zero sympathy for her. I could barely hold in my laughter on the walk over to the jail. The confession is my own. The cop said, "You're going 95 miles an hour. Do you know what the speed limit is?" "No." "It's 55 miles per hour." "I'm sorry, sir. I thought it was 65. Not a cop, but I used to read a lot of police reports at my old job. My favorite was a woman who refused a breathalyzer by telling the cop, "I won't blow on that, but I'll blow on your eggplant." In a city near to me, a guy murdered a woman, put her body in a large garment bag, and left her in a vacant lot. Unfortunately for him, he forgot to take the tags with his name and address off the bag from a recent flight. A would-be bank robber wrote his hold-up note and put it in his wallet. He got rattled at the bank and accidentally left his driver's license on the counter when he handed the note to a teller. A third crook just took on more than he could handle and apparently didn't watch the time. He had a long history of Grand Theft Auto and was hospitalized after being badly beaten in the parking lot of a sports area after a lacrosse game. The guy swore up and down that he had no idea why anyone would assault him there. Not that I want to be defending any of these people, but I feel like the stress of committing any of these crimes might overcome a lot of common sense. Personally, I rate my chances of getting away with a crime as less than 0, or maybe this is all a cover. In court, defendant called the judge Your Majesty instead of Your Honor. Friend's daughter and daughter's boyfriend got busted with a kilo of green herb. Friend's daughter says, "Oh, we weren't going to smoke it, we were going to sell it." My boyfriend is a police officer. Last week, he pulled over a drunk driver who ended up speeding off. Car chase back to his house and the drunk guy tells him, "I got home, it's okay, you can go now." Drunk guy continues arguing and it's 3 a.m. so his family wakes up and his son steps out the front porch and yells, "Damn it, Dad, you frickin' idiot, we told you to stop doing this." The serial killer BTK. He used to send taunting letters to the media and to the police about his crimes. He seemingly stopped all activity around 10 years ago when he started to communicate again. He asked the police if he could be traced if he sent them a floppy disk, and they told him no. He sent them a floppy disk, and they recovered data that included his name and his church. He was quickly arrested. My brother-in-law is a cop in a small town. Pulled a car over one night and recognized the kid. Smelled green herb inside the car and said, "Give me the green herb and I won't search your car, won't give you a ticket, and you can be on your way." The kid fights him and says he doesn't know what that smell is, there's no green herb, and
How can I trust that you won't take me to the station if I give it to you?
Brother-in-law promises again that if he hands him the green herb, he'll let him go, no questions asked. Kid keeps being a moron. Brother-in-law searches the car and finds many more substances hidden all over, as well as green herb. Brother-in-law says, "All right, let's go to the station." The kid gets upset and says,
"You said you weren't going to do this. See, I couldn't trust you."
I groan and laugh every time I think of that. What a dummy. My cop brother told me that this one time he took lunch at Popeyes while in uniform, except for the hat. Once inside, the cashier started taking his order but then stopped halfway and turned to a co-worker that just walked up. I don't remember exactly what was said, but basically the guy taking my brother's order asks the other guy if he took his green herb. The other guy says yes, but he didn't smoke at all and proceeds to hand over the green herb. The guy then says, "Cool, not to worry, he's got another stash in his car for emergencies like this." My brother then said that he just wanted to eat some lunch. The guys then realized he was a cop. One guy said something like, "Not again." As my brother started arresting the cashier, he said that he thought my brother was the security guard. So my brother, just trying to make a joke out of it, says, "Oh, you smoke herb with your security guard?" To which the guy says, "No, just my manager and his buddy." But the real funny part was when he asked another employee if the security guard was around, and the employee said they didn't have one and didn't know what the cashier was talking about. What's the most disturbing history you've learned about a house you found on the market? The lady next door to me died and wasn't found until she was more liquid than solid on her living room carpet. The family couldn't pay something back about back taxes or something, and the house went to HUD to auction. HUD paid for some cleanup, but not to replace the carpet, only steam clean it. So it finally sold and was talking to the guy who was flipping it. Before I could mention the death, he asked if the house had a water leak under the foundation, because they ripped up the carpet and pad to put down the new floor, and it was really dirty and got all over them and their clothes. I told him what happened and how HUD went cheap on what to fix before the auction. He got green as a pea and then started emptying his stomach right there on his side of the fence. My grandma sells and rents houses in the Denver area. A few weeks ago, I had to help her evict a few college bros from one of her properties. This is a cottage-style home, no second floor, no basement. These guys literally dug a hole in the wooden floor and made a basement where they've been throwing trash away for the last year. Like, it's a living room with a TV, a couple of armchairs, and a giant hole in the ground filled with ice cream wrappers, pizza boxes, and cigarette butts.
That seems like 1,000 times more effort than just taking the fricking garbage out. You know, taking out the garbage is a real pain in the butt. I'm going to perform back-breaking manual labor inside my house to avoid walking 20 feet to the street with a small bag of trash.
My parents were realtors and also flipped houses. When I was growing up, I used to help them a lot, usually by cleaning. When I was 12, I was helping with a house that was infested with roaches. I noticed the closets were smeared with crap and children's handprints. There were fingernail scratches on the insides of the doors as well. I asked my parents why this was the case. They told me the old tenants used to lock up their toddlers in the closets for days. How about the one I bought? A young person had drowned in the pool, and so far every person that I've met asks me, "You know what happened there, right?" People are nosy. My mother passed away in my childhood home, which my dad eventually sold. Years later, my brother was picking up the youth group kids, and one teen got in and said, "Our house is haunted. Years ago, a lady died in there." My brother looked her dead in the eye and said, "She was my mom, actually." The poor kid burst into tears immediately. My brother has such a horribly dry sense of humor. Huh? Got a good deal on an apartment because a lady was beaten to death next door. It was an old house converted into separate units. The narrator can't be the only one who would buy a house on the cheap because of a horrible crime there. Bring it on, ghosts! When I was looking for my last house, I went with my wife and realtor to look at several houses. We went to look at one house in particular because it didn't seem like the price they were asking could be real. A huge house sitting on tons of land with outbuildings and going for millions under market value. We got there and the realtor said, "Oh, I should mention, a serial killer lived here, and when he was put away, cops found 11 bodies on the property." I think owning this house would make me perpetually afraid of coming across a 12th body digging a vegetable patch or something.
Yeah, but you have the perfect alibi for that dead body buried in the backyard. Yes, Mr. Police Officer, we brought this house from a serial killer. I guess they forgot one body. Whoopsie, don't know how my wife got there at all. The body's still decomposing. Well, that is really weird.
Not that I was buying, but one that I was visiting. I went to visit my sister in California, and once I flew in, I wanted to shower. Well, I took a long enough shower that the mirror was all steamy when I got out, except one tiny dot in the middle of the mirror. My immediate thought process was, oh, weird. I guess if you draw on a mirror with Expo, it won't steam around it. So I went to go investigate, and upon looking right up to it, I realized it was a fricking camera lens. Well, I freaked out and ran out of her room and dressed and then went and told her. We went around the back and looked in the utility closet type thing that looked like it was in line with her room. Sure enough, the drywall had been cut away and repatched at some point. We cut it open, and while there was no camera, there was a little lens still stuck to the mirror. It's real freaky to think whoever was getting actually spied on, and if they ever actually knew. Ugh. I used to rent an apartment that was in a converted Victorian asylum. It was rumored to be haunted, but I never heard or saw anything whilst living there. When I met with the letting agent to hand the keys back at the property and for him to run through a final inspection, he asked if we had been happy there. I said something to the effect of, yes, but we were only moving as the landlord had set it up for sale. It became clear he was after some kind of ghost story as he explained that none of his colleagues liked going to any apartments in the building, because when taking photos to market one of them, the red eye detector kept triggering on his phone when no one was in the frame. The poor guy looked nervous as heck the whole time we were there.
This is actually a really common glitch when taking photos in old buildings like this. It's caused by the light reflecting off the red eyes of the unquiet dead roaming the space between this world and the next.
I photograph homes. It's normal. People die in homes. I photographed a few homes where the reason for sale was a recent self-deletion in the home. I photographed a new home where the builder ended things with himself in the garage just before the project was complete. The weirdest one was very creepy and suspicious. I photographed a billionaire's compound where the guy had had an absurd fascination with flesh. There were well over 50 heads mounted on walls from water buffalo to elephant, 5 to 10 large cats, all stuffed, chandeliers made from the feathers of rare birds, stools made from elephant feet and legs. They were hairy. Ugh. Paintings and abstract photos of oily skin, veiny muscles of humans and animals, among other things. I looked for his kill room, but I never found it. In general, I find billionaires don't behave like normal people, but this one was particularly weird. The flat opposite my house was occupied for a couple of years by a lovely young man. Long hair, gothic clothing. That might not be the right term for it, but frick it, I'm old. Super polite, if a bit reserved. He self-deleted in the flat one day. I only found out afterwards that he had had a liver transplant some years before and was worried his new liver was failing. I wish I could have helped him. I used to see him at my doctor's surgery. I had a new and sickly baby and was there a lot, and so was he. But we just said hi to each other, how are you, etc. I'm really sad for him. The flat has been occupied since by a succession of young couples. I've never said a word in case it troubles them, but I've tried harder since then to let them know I'm there if they ever need a friend. Being young and just starting out can be very lonely. I eventually heard that there was a secret passageway and stairs between bedrooms on the 2nd and 3rd floors that no one could now find, but it was apparently there, well hidden. I've been in a few where the realtor might have had a hard time selling it after it was fixed. One in particular where the entire family was taken off the mortal coil by the mother, who then set herself on fire in the back utility room. My aunt is a realtor and was selling a house that a lady owned, but it was renting out to her college-age son and a few of her friends. When they went to do the first walkthrough so my aunt could take pictures and such, it was apparent that the lady hadn't been in the house in ages. Every single room had a TV, a chair, a box of Kleenex, and a bottle of lotion. They were literally just spanking the mule with each other all over the house all the time. The lady was so embarrassed. When the sold sign went up on our last house, our neighbor came over and said, "Now you're moving out, would you like to know about your house's history?" It turned out the previous owner was a smack dealer who allowed his customers to shoot up in the living room. That explains the brown, dried blood-colored arcs all over the walls when we stripped the wallpaper. He also used to hire out his old lady from an upstairs bedroom. Incidentally, our bedroom. Lovely. An old friend of mine bought a nice house in a quiet neighborhood. The place is beautiful and has a really nice deck out back with a hot tub. About 3 weeks after closing, he was cleaning out some previously owned junk in one of the closets and found an old DVD. It was a Bridget the Midget adult movie with a hot tub scene on the cover. His hot tub. It was epic. That's not so much creepy as it is a fun fact about where you live. I would for sure be showing that to everyone. After they'd used the hot tub, of course. I've been doing this job a while now. The thing that scares me most is how often I find the locks reversed on bedrooms and basement doors. There's a lot of really crappy parents out there. I've actually done this, and it's because the little kids lock themselves in their rooms all the time. I'm big enough and resourceful enough to escape a room like this, but my kids are not. Once you've tried talking a 3-year-old through turning the little knob a few times and they're freaking out, you flip the doorknob around to prevent it from happening in the future. This isn't so much disturbing as moderately amusing. Just days after closing on my house, a friend of mine who was helping me move in told me he had been in my house many times. Turns out his childhood babysitter had lived there. Then he tells me he just wants to show me something in the backyard, and he leads me to the specific fence post on which he had drawn a wang as a child. I do wonder if he'd actually drawn it that day while I wasn't watching. Something similar happened to me. My grandmother lived in Chicago and needed to sell her house. She actually sold it to my husband's father when my husband was about 3. They ended up moving to Hammond around the time he was 15, roughly about the time I met him. My husband and my mother grew up in the same house and didn't find out about it until 4 years ago. Small world. In Seattle, there was a house just up the block from my work. This was probably around 2007 or so. There was a zombie-themed rave, and said house became the after-party. Most of the club kids knew each other, and the ages ranged from 16 to 21. Unfortunately, they invited this loner dude who came over and started unloading a shotgun at around 6:30 to 7 in the morning. Kids dressed like zombies were pouring out of the house, jumping over fences, into the street, into the backyard. Nobody knew who was actually wounded and who wasn't because everyone looked effed up due to their costume. I think like 6 or 7 people died. It's totally effed and has always stuck with me. Probably because it was in my neighborhood which I lived and worked. Eventually, the house went up for sale, and I always wondered how much the prospective buyers knew about what happened there. Houses in Seattle don't stay long on the market, so it had a lot of real estate agents and buyers coming and going. I also wondered if there was a little discount considering its history. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I've been in the residential property management industry for 14 years and have managed and leased thousands of apartments and single-family houses. A historic building I used to lease apartments for was formerly an insane asylum, and prior to that was a hospital. The building itself is on the National Historical Registry. Thankfully, I never had a bad experience here except for one unsettling thing in a stairwell, but I did meet people over the years with stories. Anyway, certain things are required for historical landmarks and restoration tax credits in this particular city. So many of the apartments had to maintain certain features of the original design and architecture, like some old tile was still on the walls and floors. The thing that creeped me out was the basement. Even after more than 50 years on most days, you could catch a whiff of formaldehyde. Some days were more pungent and distinct than others. Of course, being the basement, it also had the addition of that musty basement smell. Since this was once a hospital, obviously, it had a morgue. There are a handful of apartments in the basement, and the original tile on the floor marked where the morgue originally started. In one of those apartments, there's a bedroom with incredibly spacious walk-in closets. If you haven't already figured it out, those 2 massive closets are the old body lockers, with the original latches on the walls next to the entrance to the closets. I still for the life of me can't understand how anyone could live in that apartment, because I wouldn't even go into that apartment by myself. These are my 2 most outrageous. I present the tales of the crazy old gynecologist and the adult toy aficionado. The first is short and sweet. A lady wants me to list her house. I go over and do the routine. As I go to the bedroom closet, she yells, "Oh no, don't go in there, it's a horrible mess. It's a walk-in closet, but please don't go in there, it's such a mess and I'm embarrassed." She went on about it way too long for it to just be a mess. I leave it alone and that's that. House gets listed, and 2 weeks later I offer to do an open house. The lady has started packing already because I already helped her find a new house. She leaves, I get the open house going, and a nice couple comes in. They go to the master bedroom and there's a wall of boxes in front of the closet. I explain that's a walk-in closet, and last time I was there the lady said it was just filled to the brim with stuff. The wife wants to see the closet. The husband starts moving boxes. I ask him not to and he keeps going, "If I'm going to buy a house, I want to see the whole thing." Well, he kind of had me there because I know they loved everything else about the house, and the wife seemed super stoked about the kitchen and the master bath. The last box is moved and the door is opened. Inside is a 10 by 10 foot room, jam-packed with phallic adult toys. They're each standing up on very nice custom shelving units with glass doors on the front. The glass doors also have numbers made from a home label maker unit. On the inside of the door is a large sheet of paper. Each number has a corresponding name of some guy. That's when we noticed 2 large boxes in the corner. Each box contained 36 unopened Clona Johnson adult toy making kits. We stared in amazement for a while, and then the husband just fricking lost it. It took a good 20 minutes for him to stop laughing, or at least randomly bursting out in laughter. We put everything back the way it was, and that was the end of me letting anyone check out the closet for the rest of the open house. That couple actually ended up buying the house, and since I know everyone will ask, there were 183 homemade statues of eggplants in the closet, and a few store-bought ones too. Now, the other story is the crazy old gynecologist. He asked me to come in and give him a price. He didn't want to sell, but wanted an official market analysis to present in court for his divorce. He offered me $500, so I was happy to come out and write it up for him. First off, I didn't know his profession. He never told me much later until he'd asked me to put doctor and his name on the paperwork, and I asked what kind of doctor he was. Anyway, I show up and the outside of the house looks great. It's super clean, very well maintained for a 70-year-old house, and looks pretty as a picture. I walk in and there's nothing but shelving units lining every single wall. Floor-to-ceiling shelving units. They're also in the middle of every room on the first floor. All of them are loaded with plastic storage bins that are labeled. They all seem to have pretty routine stuff. I'm thinking the guy is just a very organized hoarder. One has boxes and boxes of new pens. One is all rolls of tape. One big one is all toilet paper. As I get further into the house, the storage bins go from office supplies and toiletries to spoons. Just a giant clear storage tub full of random spoons. One is used paper clips. Used paper clips? He's differentiating between new and used ones. Alright, whatever. That's when I notice every room has a TV and a surround sound system, and it's all set up on a shelving unit. This was back when flat screens were like $5,000 and every room had one. Every room also had flying saucers on the ceiling, which he said were repeaters so he could change every TV to the same channel at the same time. I must admit, that was pretty cool. In any case, we go upstairs and it's a mess. The shelving units were all along the walls, but not in the middles of the rooms. And he's got a toaster in the middle of the bedroom floor with a bag of butternut bread next to it and a plate with a mushy stick of butter that looked like it was a week old. It had that sick yellow crystallized look to it. There were books all over the floor and it looked like he just sat on the floor reading and eating toast. Everything was sprawled out in a perfect circle around where he'd sit. That's when I noticed the clear storage tubs were much stranger up here. One entire rack was used tissues. Another several boxes were lubricant. A couple were speculums. Then I realized there were a lot of boxes of tissues, new and used, around his little toast and book circle. I took my measurements and couldn't help but look at some of the titles on his bookshelf. The two that stand out the most were Doing the Deed by Yourself and Show Me. I mostly remember Show Me because it was a very controversial book when I was a kid. It's basically a published book of borderline illegal material disguised as a life skills book. Everything else on the wall of books was also related to this kind of material. And we're not even close to done. I walked into this other bedroom and realized how dark it was. He had tinfoil taped in the windows to black out the room. It was filled with computers on a giant custom-built horseshoe desk. If I recall, there were 8 or 9 screens wrapping around the room, in addition to 2 big flat-screen TVs. As I measured the room, I noticed more tissues and several boxes of new tissues. The screensavers were all showing slideshows of either undressed women or women in bathing suits. I say nothing and we move on. And here's where it gets weird. Oh, you thought we were past the weird stuff? Hold on to your hat. He takes me to the basement. It's a dungeon. Not some flashy, sanitized adult dungeon either. This was dark, dank, and musty. 2 cages in 2 corners, some kind of crucifixion cross with restraints, some weird table with restraints, a full wall of whips and chains and needles. One featured a paddle that had tacks sticking out of it. Swings for doing the deed of varying sorts hanging on the rafters. A wooden trough filled with what I hope was water. There was also a coffin, a rack, an Iron Maiden, and stocks. You know, like the medieval head and hands town square punishment device. Every wall, support, and piece of furniture had some kind of restraints on it, and he walked me through as if nothing was strange about this. And the coup de grace, he shows me the utility room and then shows me his secret room, where the door was disguised as paneling on the back wall of the laundry room. Inside looked like a dungeon out of a fricking horror movie. A giant shelving unit filled with VHS tapes was along one wall. A computer desk with a computer and old-school video editing machines, I assume, boxes of his favorite tissues all over the editing station. Then there was a brass bed with restraints. There were no sheets on the bed, and it was horribly stained with God only knows what. Not blood, though. I probably would have called the cops if I saw blood on it. There was a mirror above the bed with a microphone dangling and 2 VHS cameras on tripods trained right on the bed. This guy acted like all of this was totally normal. He was like, "Oh, and here's the secret room. I like to come down here to relax. It's just so quiet down here and it feels so safe because it's just hidden away from the rest of the house. If someone ever breaks in, I'd come down here and they'd never even know to look here." No mention whatsoever of the obvious use of this room. Screwing? Tickling the pickle? Murder? The unspeakable act? I have no fricking clue. I collected my $500 and got the F out of there as fast as I could. No one believed me back at the office, and you know what? I don't believe them either. I wouldn't have believed myself if I'd heard it from someone else. I'm guessing he's dead now since he was, here's the kicker, probably about 75 to 80 years old, and this was about 15 years ago. His age and frailty, in addition to my morbid curiosity, was probably the only reason I didn't take off immediately. I remember thinking in my head, keep your guard up, you're going to F this old dude up if you have to. That was one terrifying visit I'll never forget. It's also the only time I didn't shake a customer's hand as I was leaving. My hand still tingles when I think about the introductory handshake and all those clear tubs filled with used tissues. Well, words are failing the narrator. My God. What do you even say or do in that sort of situation? I only wonder what the inheritor or buyer of that house had to do with the thousands of dollars worth of equipment. Anyway, on to our last few stories. Not a realtor, happened to some friends who bought a property. Very old site, about 300 years old, which had been part of a convent, the living area of the nuns specifically. The aforementioned place had been refurbished as small apartments and houses about 50 years ago. They went to live there and there was some maintenance given to certain places of the property, the common areas. There was a wall which was slightly wider than the others. They began to give maintenance to that wall, but the outer layer fell apart due to the rain and old age. While trying to fix that, they found dozens of skeletons of babies, very little babies, and very old little skeletons. Well, authorities and historians came and went by, and they came to the conclusion that the nuns tossed their babies there right after giving birth to them. God knows if they were alive or dead by then. Not unheard of, old religious orders were very strict about that, and then there were even more gruesome policies regarding nuns' pregnancies. My uncle bought a caravan down the coast on a well-known beach. Just prior to selling it, police detectives turned up and turned the place upside down and inside out, looking for some sort of information. Turns out the family of one of Australia's most notorious serial killers used to own the caravan many years ago. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.